A very good afternoon to everyone out there, and we will start. Today is the last session as far as Mains 365 social issues is concerned, and I hope whatever we discussed in the previous two sessions, everything has fallen in place and you guys have received the PPTs, right? So see, the objective is not to provide you excessive content. That was not the objective. The objective is to provide you consolidated content, right? Now, I know that since you guys are writing mains this year, you are aware enough that what is supposed to be read and what is not. So if I am providing you certain content, for example, I clearly specified that the schemes which I am providing is just for the reference where you have to just prepare the objectives. Okay? Don't get intimidated by the number of slides. If you look at it and if you've revised and if you've gone through those slides which have been provided, hardly a minute or two would be required to go through one slide. So it would be a quick thing, right? And just make sure that I know remembering the entire statements is not possible. That is basically provided for first time reading. But whatever things are being written in the boxes, right? Whatever has been highlighted, those are the terms which we expect you to remember so that you can reproduce that on the paper. Is that very clear? So today would be the last session and it might happen that we are not able to cover all the topics. Maybe 2-3 topics are left. Okay? That depends with the speed and everything. So it might happen that 2-3 topics we're not able to cover. So I would be providing you the content. What we'll do is that when we are having the updation class, we will just make a reference to the topics in case some of the topic is left. ठीक है ना? But material would be provided. My handwritten content would be provided with respect to all the material. ठीक है? Let's very quickly start. So the last thing that we finished off was the global hunger index and everything. We have talked about hunger, we have talked about malnutrition. Then I also gave you certain questions, right? Now, the next topic that we have to discuss is midday meal. It has been revamped and the ambit of midday meal has been expanded and it has been renamed as PM Poshan Abhiyan. ठीक है ना? So let's very quickly have a look at it. So this is the background that one should know, that what was midday meal scheme, what was the objective. Okay, so the scheme was a centrally sponsored scheme under Ministry of Education. Okay, the central government used to provide the free food grains to states. It still remains. This is just the background. It was the largest school meal program. The overall objective, if we have to talk about, it was basically to improve the nutritional needs of the student, to ensure increase in the enrollment or universalization with respect to enrollment, retention, attendance of the student. That was the objective. And also to provide nutritional support to the children in drought affected areas. Then clearly the beneficiaries have been highlighted. This time the ambit has been expanded to incorporate preschool children also. That is Bal Vatikas. We'll just have a look at it. So abhi tak kya tha? Primary and upper primary children of government and government aided schools were incorporated in the ambit of beneficiaries. However, this ambit has been widened to incorporate the preschool children, and that was one of the agenda of new education policy. Right. Now, this is the content from where I expect you to start, as in what were the prospects. You might get a question with respect to analysis of midday meal, the significance of midday meal scheme. So if you look at the prospects of midday meal scheme, it improves the nutritional level of children, it increases their attendance, enrollment, retention. Obviously that is the objective, right? It improves the learning outcome. If you are consuming micronutrients in a sufficient quantity, it will improve your learning outcome. It will reduce the dropouts, especially the girl child, from the marginalized section. As you remember, yesterday's lecture I spoke that NSSO survey as well as Dandekar and Rath committee says that a poor person is spending 2/3 of their income on food. So if one time meal is also provided free of cost, right, it would be a good amount of incentive basically to send your children to school. So it will reduce the dropouts, especially among the girl child. It will create the potential to reap the benefits of demographic dividend, because demographic dividend depends upon the quality of workforce. So whether they are educated, whether they are nourished or not. It also creates the scope for achievement of sustainable development goal number 2, that is related to hunger and nutrition. Then 3, that is health. 4, that is education. It will also create opportunities for women empowerment, because most of the women are employed in the capacity of cook. And it will also enable us to achieve the objective of social equity. So in every which way, midday meal scheme is a very promising, or was a very promising scheme. However, over the period of time, it has not been able to achieve the desired objective because there are certain challenges which are existing as far as midday meal is concerned. First and foremost, there is a lot of wastage of food which is happening because we do not have adequate infrastructure with respect to storage, cooking, serving of food. Then there is problem with respect to safety provisions, unhygienic surroundings. I have given an example that in context of Andhra, there was the issue with centralized kitchen because infrastructure was weak, so they thought that we can have a centralized kitchen concept. However, it was seen that in Chilukanagar in Andhra, the schools were serving leftover food. So obviously unhygienic food was being served. Then there is problem of substandard food being served or adulterated food being served. For example, in context of Sonbhadra, there was a school where 1 liter of milk was mixed with 1 bucket of water to serve 81 students. Similarly, in Mirzapur, the school was serving chapati with salt. So obviously the provision, the intention of midday meal was very good. However, it has failed to deliver. Then another problem is the social discrimination which is existing with respect to caste identities. Specifically in certain states like UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Dalit kids are being discriminated. Then overall जो monitoring system है that has not been proper. For example, पहले ये होता था कि IITs हो गए, TIS हो गया, ये लोग field visit and social auditing करते थे, ठीक है. But after 2015 the contract was not renewed. As a result, we did not have a proper monitoring mechanism. Spelling में E नहीं I होगा, sorry for that. Then issue with respect to salaries of the cook and helpers. Then there is problem of corruption and leakages. Is that clear? Now, when the challenges have been provided, keeping that in mind, there has been changes which have been made. But before that, if you want to make a reference to what have been the good practices, then ये जो तिथि भोजन का idea है गुजरात में, that has been incorporated in the current context as well. So it has been a good initiative. That is a community participation program which is providing the additional food items to the children on special occasion. Similarly, Andhra में 82% students are availing the benefits of midday meal, and they have been provided nutritious food like eggs, bananas twice a week. Similarly, Maharashtra also have a concept of Sneh Bhojan. ठीक है, their ambit also, their coverage with respect to midday meal has been very significant. So you can make reference, for example, good examples and bad examples to give a proper analysis. On one hand, we have incidences like Chilukanagar, Sonbhadra, Mirzapur. So there have been schools which have not been faring well. On the other hand, there are large state models which have been delivering on the intended promise. Okay. So overall, this was suggested as a way forward. So keeping in mind the way forwards as well as the challenges, okay, the government has come up with a more revamped version of midday meal, that is nothing but PM Poshan. So it is talking about awareness generation with respect to nutrition and health. It is talking about efficiency in delivery system or data collection. It is talking about timely payment to the workers or robust infrastructure, as well as community participation to ensure checks and balances, right? So basically, the new scheme which has been introduced, or new scheme nahi bolungi, revamped and expanded version of midday meal which has been introduced is PM Poshan. Here it is saying that not only we are going to provide the food, the cooked meal, but also make sure that the meal which is being provided is nutritious. ऐसा नहीं था कि midday meal में nutritional component था नहीं, but then they are highlighting that the previous scheme was only focusing on the food. They did not focus on nutrition. But ठीक है, implementation में दिक्कत आई होगी, लेकिन previous schemes were focusing on nutrition. There was a provision how much protein intake has to be provided, how much calorie intake has to be ensured. See, at the end of it, it depends how you implement. Anyhow, that's not our concern. So the point here is that the new revamped scheme which is initiated with the objective that now we are going to focus on the nutritional aspect of the food which is being provided. ठीक है. So again, you should know the basic provisions. It will be a centrally sponsored scheme launched for a period of 5 years. The entire cost with respect to food grains, transportation, management, फूड ग्रेन्स का ही ट्रांसपोर्टेशन हो गया, मैनेजमेंट हो गया, मॉनिटरिंग हो गया, एवरीथिंग विल बी बेयर बाय द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, वेयर एज द कुकिंग कॉस्ट हो गया, पेमेंट टू द कुक्स एंड द वर्कर्स, दे विल बी स्प्लिट इन द रेशियो ऑफ 60:40. So it's a centrally sponsored scheme. Is that very clear? Now the ambit of the scheme has been extended to the children. This is what I was mentioning earlier. It has been extended to the children belonging to preschools, that is Bal Vatikas. Bal Vatikas were basically the preschool which has been attached with Anganwadis. Is that very clear? Okay. Then they are saying that in order to promote or to fulfill the objectives of Atmanirbhar Bharat or Vocal for Local, we are going to take help of women self-help groups or farmer producer organizations. Then remember I told you social audit वगैरह नहीं हो रहा था because after 2015 the contracts of IITs have not been, or TIS has not been renewed. So in that capacity only it has been said that social audit will be made mandatory and the university and college students will be engaged so as to ensure proper implementation. Is that very clear? Through field visits. Then supplementary nutrition की बात, जैसे आंध्रा में नहीं था कि eggs and banana twice a week. So they are saying that if it is falling within the allocated budget, then the state has the freedom, depending upon whether they want to provide any supplementary nutrition, because maybe the incidences of anemia in their region is very high, or any local vegetable or something they want to provide. Then the concept of nutritional garden and Titi Bhojan has been identified. Nutritional garden as in to promote the concept of nutritional gardens in school, one thing, and basically to provide the additional micronutrients, and the other concept is Titi Bhojan, the same concept that we talked about Gujarat ke context mein. Is that very clear? ठीक है. So I hope you understood that in case the question comes, for example, critically analyze to what extent midday meal has been successful in achieving the desired objective. To what extent midday meal has been successful in achieving the desired objective. ठीक है? Or in the context of midday meal, discuss its prospects and the challenges faced in the process of implementation. So basically you can be given a question, especially paper 2. Paper 2 का part है ना poverty and hunger. ठीक है? So as a part of that, midday meal scheme का analysis can be a very probable question. So what are the prospects? What are the challenges? What should be the way forward? Keeping note of the challenges and way forward, the government has come up with a revamped version. अब revamped version का analysis cannot be done. भाई अभी तो launch किया है ना, अगले 5 साल देखें तो what would be the situation? Is that clear for everyone? ठीक है. The next topic. Just a sec. Let me first take this topic. Let me start with this. Just a sec, please. I pressed the wrong button. So the next topic that we have is a general idea about food security. ठीक है? So you might get a question with respect to food security. So you should know what do you mean by food security, right? So when people at all the time have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to meet their needs and preferences, that is known as food security. Now, what are the implications if we do not or we fail to ensure food security? That what would be the implication? Again, you can discuss the implication at individual level. You can discuss the implication at the national level. Is that very clear? So basically, the safe, sufficient, nutritious food should be provided on a sustainable basis, right? That is what is the concept of food security. If you are not able to ensure food security at the individual level, it is going to impact the cognitive ability of an individual. It is going to impact their learning outcomes. It is going to definitely impact their work performance or efficiency at workplace. They would be more susceptible to contract infection or diseases. There would be substantial loss of productivity, and it might overall result into decline in standard of living and quality of life. So the food security as a concept is a very important concept to understand. तो अगर question आता है, what do you mean by food security? ठीक है, in the backdrop of growing incidences of hunger, what are the implications of food insecurity? You might get a question. Now, if you look at the context of India, there exists a paradox. This is what I mentioned yesterday also, that on one hand, we are a food surplus nation, whereas on the other hand, there are a lot of people who are going hungry every day, right? So India is a food surplus nation, producing approximately 283 million tons of grains. However, according to Food and Agriculture Organization, 193 million people, they go hungry every day in India. India constitutes 23% of the undernourished population. Is that clear? Now, overall, although I have already discussed with you the issues of hunger, I've already discussed with you the causes of malnutrition, but in case the question comes on food security, this is how you can present the answer. That what are the reasons why there is food insecurity in India? First of all, we have failed to improve the agriculture productivity. The insecurity among children is because of certain factors. For example, population growth, poverty, lack of education, gender inequality, okay, lack of knowledge among the parents with respect to the nutrition, right? Then among the women, if we are talking about food insecurity, it can be because of lack of financial independence, it can be because of wage gap, it can be because of low female labor force participation. Now, this is mostly with respect to women and child. You can add the caste dimensions, the tribal dimensions also here. Then the another problem is, although government is trying to address the problem of food insecurity, but there is a problem of poor identification of beneficiaries. There is a problem of wastage of food grains. This we have talked about yesterday, that how the food is getting wasted because of lack of proper warehouses. Then there is lack of proper implementation of the nutritional programs. For example, there are incidences of corruption, hoarding, okay? There is lack of coherent food and nutritional policies, then lack of convergent approach, and then you can put down the as in the miscellaneous factor, that basically low income hai, small land holdings hai, to food productivity nahi ho rahi hai, expenditure on research and development is not there. So you might add these points to it. Now comes what should be the way forward. So if you are talking about the way forward, you can talk about the irrigation facilities, you can talk about better identification of beneficiaries, right? You can talk about the practices from other countries with respect to storage or warehousing can be emulated, for example in context of China. Then you can also make sure that availability and affordability, especially to the BPL, below poverty line people, with respect to food grains on a sustainable basis. आप भी कहोगे कि ऐसा तो है नहीं कि availability and affordability has not been ensured by National Food Security Act is there, Antyodaya Anna Yojana is there, then midday meal scheme, everything is there. But then it has to be implemented on a sustainable basis. The special provisions have to be incorporated with respect to informal sector workers. Then in order to improve agriculture productivity, irrigation needs to be worked upon, quality seeds have to be provided, fertilizers have to be ensured, the credit has to be provided at a low interest rate, crop diversification हो गया, household gardening या kitchen garden का concept हो गया, food grain banks हो गए, all of that concept needs to be further pushed. Then awareness generation with respect to the benefits of nutritional food has to be created through IEC campaigns, then adequate or robust implementation of government schemes is the need of the hour. Now, I am just trying to help you to understand that when the question was with respect to hunger, when the question was with respect to malnutrition, when the question is with respect to as in the COVID dimension or the food insecurity, although the essence remains the same, but while writing the points, there is change in the weightage. For example, when I'm talking about food insecurity, our focus is more on agriculture productivity. Our focus is more on crop diversification, kitchen garden, irrigation, fertilizer. लेकिन जब हम hunger वगैरह की बात कर रहे थे, तो it was a complete thing. Right? तो यहाँ पे बस इतना difference आपको समझने की जरूरत है कि what kind of questions are you attempting? Is that clear? Now, this is the topic that we have. Very quickly, we can go through it. National Food Security Act, it basically is providing you the legal right. You are entitled. There are certain eligible households who are entitled to subsidize food. Is that clear? Then who are those eligible households? Basically, the priority households would be provided, whosoever is the eligible household, the priority household would be provided 5 kg food grains per person per month. And those who are falling under Antyodaya Anna Yojana, 35 kgs of food grains would be provided every month. In case you've been failed to provide the food grains, food allowance would be provided. Then it is a form of a life cycle approach where the needs, the nutritional requirements of the pregnant women, the lactating mother, or the children from 6 months to 14 years would be taken care of. Then in case, because of pregnancy, you've not been able to work, okay, in that case 6,000 rupees the monetary benefit would be provided. Okay, is that very clear? Then this act clearly specifies what would be the responsibility of the central government, what would be the responsibility of the state government. So with respect to, so there is clear cut division of duties which have been prescribed here. For example, with respect to allocation of food grains, transportation of the food grains to the depots, or the assistance to be provided so that the food grains can be delivered from the Food Corporation of India, go down to the doorsteps of the fair price shop. That is the job of the center. However, with respect to state, identification of eligible households, providing them or issuing them the ration cards, or for that matter, distributing the licenses to the fair price shop, all of that would be the task of the state government. This is more important from prelims point of view, but in case the question comes on National Food Security Act, let us say, ठीक है, तो आप start कर सकते हो, अगर कभी पूछ लेते हैं ना, analysis of National Food Security Act, to what extent it has been successful or something like that. So you start with a premise that, you know, it is important to ensure food security. Otherwise, cognitive development, learning outcome, demographic dividend will turn into a disaster, the economic productivity would be impacted, all of that. So keeping that in mind, the government introduced the act to address the problem of food insecurity. Then when you are talking about this, very briefly you can talk about the provisions of the National Food Security Act, because if you don't know the provision, then what will you analyze, right? So उस context में diagrammatic representation can also be very healthy, as in very advisable, क्योंकि it would not take much space. तो बीच में आप लिख सकते हो objective provisions of National Food Security Act, and then you can make that hub and spoke model. ठीक है ना? We'll see. हम तो सारी questions में hub and spoke model ही बनाते हैं. ठीक है? So that can be made use of it. So basically, the National Food Security Act, there was a reason that जो भी subsidized price was fixed, it was fixed at the time the act was made. It was being asked that by 2016, that subsidized price, it was fixed for 3 years. So it was supposed to change. However, even after 2016, the prices have remained unchanged, because of which the food subsidy bill has increased, right? You might have done this in your economy also, and you might have prepared this for your prelims as well. So the food subsidy bill has been rising because MSP is more than the central issue price. So it is perceived that because of which the burden of maintaining the food stocks or the surplus stock among or within the FCI godowns is increasing. Why? Because there is high production, there is hike in MSP. At the same time, there has been no change in the central issue prices. So there is accumulation of stocks which is happening. At the same time, it is also the one of the major concern has been कि अगर CIP को, that is central issue price, the price at which you are providing the food grains in the market, if that is not being revised and the population keeps on growing or increasing, so there would be higher quota and higher supply of highly subsidized. तो जिस price पे सरकार procure कर रही है, that is more than the price at which it is issuing. So the issue price is less than the minimum support price. So if this continues, then there would be a depression in the market prices of the food grains. However, at the same time, there would be some farmers who would not be able to sell their grains to the government agencies, then they will face decline in the income. Is that clear? क्योंकि जो सेंट्रल इश्यू प्राइस है वो तो कम है, ठीक है ना, तो और जो एमएसपी है वो ज्यादा है, तो अगर वो फूड ग्रेन्स को गवर्नमेंट एजेंसीज प्रोक्योर नहीं करती हैं तो ऑब्वियसली दे वुड नॉट बी गेटिंग एमएसपी फॉर देयर फूड ग्रेन्स, द मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस, एंड दे वुड हैव टू सेल देयर products in the market at a lower rate. So the income would be negatively impacted. As a result, the revision was being proposed here. ठीक है? So on the basis of that, ठीक है, उस revision पे हम इतना नहीं भी बात करेंगे तो चलेगा. The issue that we were supposed to discuss here largely was that what is National Food Security Act, what is the idea of food security as a concept, what is the implication, what has been the challenges, and what is the way forward. That is more with respect to mains point of view. This can be avoided, ठीक है. But anyhow, if you've studied that in economy, एक बस reference दे लो, that the revision is not based on the evaluation of functioning and efficacy. They have as in proposed to reduce the subsidies which is being provided because the subsidy burden is increasing. तो वो यही कह रहे हैं कि आपने सारा whatever revision that you are providing or proposing, that is more on the basis of the subsidy bill rather than the evaluation of the functioning and efficiency of the Food Security Act. In fact, there has been so many incidences of mismanagement of food procurement as well as storage, and there is no proposal to deal with the mismanagement. Overall, the entire idea of reducing the subsidy will further weaken the food and nutritional security, because even today the majority or the major chunk of the population is still not being able to afford the food, as in the nutritious food. And post-COVID, because of the COVID-induced economic distress, their accessibility as well as the affordability of food, especially the nutritious food, has become a challenge. Is that clear? So overall, what should be the way forward? So one nation, one ration card idea, so as to reduce the leakages and effective targeting. Then there has to be better targeting of the beneficiaries, okay? So that the impact of the scheme or the proposal of the act can be targeted specifically to the most downtrodden section of the society. Then there should be a separate evaluation with respect to the functioning of the act. Is that very clear? ठीक है. Then one can also come up with the idea of alternative to subsidized food, but यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा controversial हो जाता है जब हम बात करते हैं that income should be transferred directly to the account, because many a times that money can be misused, right? तो खाने को तो इंसान खाएगा ही ना, there would not be any other alternative. But let us say a money is being provided to you, so that can be misused or that can be digressed from the core objective. So it might further aggravate the problem of hunger. But anyhow, this has been one of the proposal that the income transfers to the consumers through direct benefit transfer. Is that very clear? And if you are making any revision with respect to the coverage of the people, it has to be on the basis of social mapping. That is, evidence-based decision making has to be there. There has to be collection of credible data, and based on that, any kind of revision with respect to the ambit of the subsidy should be made. As in, whosoever would be able to access the benefits of the subsidy, you should make sure that whatever alteration that you are doing, it is on the basis of social mapping. Is that very clear? Social mapping is the evidence-based policy making. Okay? Then better management of surplus stocks. Way forward suggested है कि this is how also it can be done. ठीक? Then another topic that we have. So please remember, you might get a question on food security. You might get a question on National Food Security Act. So keeping that in mind, just prepare yourself. Then the next topic that we have is paternity leave. Obviously, paternity leave is concerned with the leave which has to be provided to the father with respect to the childbirth. In India में कोई legal provision नहीं है. हाँ, central government employees को having less than 2 surviving children, the paternity leave of 15 days is provided, and that is also applicable to the adopted kids. And it has to be availed before the 6-month lapse of 6-month period, either after delivery or adoption. Is that very clear? ठीक है. So this is the With respect to private organization, we do not have any provision. अपनी मर्जी से, जैसे यूनिसेफ ने 16 weeks paid leave दी है, and Zomato India has talked about parity लाने के लिए 26 weeks of paid leave is being provided. Now, why paternity leave is important? Because if you've studied your ethics well, there is a concept called socialization in which it says that the father is a very important source of socialization with respect to gender appropriate behavior. Okay? So a girl learns to make heterosexual adjustment based on what kind of socialization is being provided by the father, and boy learns the gender appropriate behavior based on the socialization which is provided by the father. So father plays a very important role in socialization of children, as against the myth that it is only the mother. Is that very clear? Then second thing is post-pregnancy. There have been a lot of symptoms of postpartum depression, anxiety, stress, which is emerging among the new mothers. So in that context, if the father is being provided the paternity leave, it would enable the women to reduce the burden of handling the kid, right? So the rearing of child becomes easier. And then third most important thing is, it is because that there exists this disparity in the paid leave which is being provided, the desirability of women in the labor market has significantly declined. So that is another challenge which is being faced. In fact, it has found that since the time Maternity Benefit Act has been passed, the recruitment of women in the formal labor market has declined, especially in the middle rung of jobs as well as the senior position, if the women belongs to the young reproductive age bracket. Is that very clear? So it is very important to prevent gender stereotyping of childcare, to ensure better socialization of the children, to reduce the incidences of postpartum depression or anxiety, to reduce the decline or to arrest the decline of female in the labor force participation, to arrest the trend of declining desirability of women in the labor market, or to arrest the problem of wage gap which exist in the labor market. At the same time, there is growing trend of nuclearization of family, right? And in the nuclear family, you do not have the social support system. So then the chances of negative impact of mental illness is also increasing. For example, suicide. For example, the child infanticide has been increasing. There have been many incidences where the mother, the new mother, is not able to cope up with the stress. So it has often resulted into incidences of suicide or the killing of the child. So all of that needs to be understood. Is that clear? However, there are certain challenges which is associated with the concept of paternity leave. पहली बात, अगर तो ये बिल पास हो भी जाता है, you are just providing 15 days of paid leave. So again, you are actually promoting, glorifying that gender biasness which exists with respect to the upbringing of the child or the socialization of the child. The gender stereotype is being reinforced, where on one hand, women you are providing 26 weeks, whereas to the male father you are providing 15 days. So that disparity is quite evident. Second thing is, the male themselves are not very interested in availing the paternity leave because of the toxic masculinity which exists in the society, where there is undervaluation of the work which is being done by the women. There are certain work which male considers not to be worthy doing because that is the job of the women. Then there exists a very well consolidated, entrenched concept of sexual division of labor. So clearly the work is divided on the basis of sexes. So people don't find it odd that why women is provided 26 weeks of leave and on the other hand the males are not provided, because that is an accepted norm that there are certain jobs which are divided on the basis of your sex. Is that very clear? Okay. Then employers are also not very keen on providing the paternity leave because it would be an economic burden and it might impact their competitiveness in the labor market. Is that very clear? However, there has been certain trends which are changing and which needs to be appreciated. So whether it is work from home culture, which we have seen in the backdrop of COVID-19, then the initiative by UNICEF or Zomato India, it's a welcome move. So overall what needs to be done is, first and foremost, paternity benefit bill पास करने से पहले द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ जेंडर इक्वालिटी हैज टू बी एस्टैब्लिश्ड. The bill has to be made open on the public platforms for debate, deliberation and discussion, where people are made to realize that what was the rationale behind paternity leave, right? It is not just because कि 15 दिन की छुट्टी मिल जाएगी आपको और जिसके पैसे मिलेंगे. The rationality has to be established in the society. There has to be more socialization with respect to gender equal norms. There has to be more sensitization with respect to the mental pressure which a woman goes through post pregnancy period. So all of that needs to be understood, and finally paternity benefit bill needs to see the light of the day. Then another topic that we have in your, I hope this is understood. Okay. So right now no question. To what extent paternity leave, to what extent concept of paternity leave will help in ensuring women empowerment and inclusive development in the society. Women empowerment and inclusive development in the society. To what extent concept of paternity leave will help in ensuring women empowerment and inclusive development in society. 10 marker. Or you might get a question generally saying, what is the concept of paternity leave? What have been the challenges that we have faced with respect to implementation of paternity leave? Or why have we not been able to implement the concept of paternity leave in context of India? ये भी question हो सकता है. What do you mean by paternity leave? Question mark. Discuss the factors or the challenges which has prohibited the government from introducing the concept of paternity leave in context of Indian society. Is that clear? I hope this is clear for everyone. Next, migration. So, as far as migration as a topic is concerned, it's a ऐसे कोई separate topic नहीं है आपके syllabus में, but there is a topic in your GS paper 1 that is population and associated issues. Now there are three aspects of population change, right? There are three factors which governs population change. You have fertility, you have mortality, as well as migration. So migration is a sub part of population and associated issues. Now when you are preparing migration as a topic, then concept of migration, what do or who are migrants, then what are different types of migration based on destination or duration, then what are the causes of migration, what are the consequences of migration, what are the issue with the migrants, and what should be the way forward. This is how we intend to proceed. In general, migration is the third component of population change other than fertility and mortality. It refers to the spatial or geographical mobility from one region to another involving change in residence for a considerable period of time. According to census, a person who is residing in a place other than the place of birth is termed as a migrant or has changed the usual place of residence from one to another, as in the place of last residence is different from the place of current residence. In that situation also the person would be termed as a migrant. Now number of internal migrants in India as per economic survey of I think 2017-18 has provided the data, it is 450 million. The census 2011 also specifies that approximately 450 million people are termed as internal migrants in India. Now based on destination and based on duration, we have different types of migration. Okay? So if I talk about based on destination, so obviously it can be the internal migration or the international migration. International migration we are not talking about, that would be more referred in your IR. We are just concerned about internal migration, right? So based on destination, it can be internal or international. With respect to internal migration, there can be different types. For example, rural to rural, rural to urban, urban to rural, or urban to urban. So there are 4 types of migration which is mentioned. I hope you understand that urbanization is one of the type of migration. Okay? It becomes easy to connect the dots then. Okay? Then on the basis of duration, you have permanent, you have semi-permanent, or you have temporary migration. Nothing to write, everything is provided. When you migrate from source to destination area for a very long period of time without having any intention of coming back, that is permanent migration. Semi-permanent says when you move from source to destination area, however, see, when you are migrating, you migrate because you want to avail better opportunities for socio-economic mobility. So when you migrate, right, so in the destination areas, if the cost of living is very high, right, you do not have decent employment opportunities, the standard of living is declining, it has become economically unsustainable to live in the destination areas, so you are forced to the source area. So that is known as semi-permanent. You did not have the intention of coming back, but you had to come back because it was difficult for you to sustain yourself in the destination areas. So that is semi-permanent, right? So again, there come 2 concepts here. The migration can also be forced migration and it can also be a voluntary migration. So when I talk about voluntary, one of the aspect of it can be temporary migration. Okay? In temporary migration, your permanent residence remains the same. You are just moving to other places for the economic activities. So the destination of economic activities is undergoing a change, but your place of permanent residence remains the same. And this specifically happened for those people, let us say, employed in agriculture. Agriculture is a seasonal occupation, so you would always have a lean season. And in the absence of alternate employment opportunity, during the lean season, people tends to migrate to the destination areas for jobs. Once the lean season is over, they come back to their source region. So this is known as temporary. It can also be known as cyclical. It can also be known as seasonal migration. Is that very clear? Or circular? Now, why are we even discussing about migrants? Because during the period of COVID, the migrants have been the major sufferer, as in there has been large scale exodus of the migrant population. Okay? Now, the large exodus of migrant population has happened during the lockdown period, so the issue becomes important. Now, overall internal migrants की बात करें तो approximately 450 million. Within them, अगर मैं seasonal migrants की बात करूं तो economic survey says 139 million people are the seasonal migrants. However, this is not the most credible data. The reason we don't have credible data because it is often found that seasonal migrants remain out of bound of the government and civil society. Right? And if you realize that how are you calculating migrants? You are calculating it on the basis of census, and census is conducted every 10th year, right? Abhi tak to hua bhi nahi hai. So the point I'm trying to make here is that is too long a time. Isme to kitni baar seasonal migration ho chuka hoga. Right? So the challenge is that we do not have a credible data specifically with respect to the seasonal migrants, and it is the seasonal migrants who are the most deprived section, because majority of these seasonal migrants, majority kya? As in, हाँ ठीक है, they majorly they are dominated or they are concentrated in low-paying menial jobs or informal job market. For example, the construction sector, the hotel industry, the textile, manufacturing, domestic work, transportation, and all of that has been majorly hit in the backdrop of COVID-19, lockdown or pandemic, whichever way you want to present it. Now, you might get a question. Write down a question. Internal migration is governed by not only the pattern of development. Internal migration is governed by not only the pattern of development but also the social structure of the society. Internal migration is not only governed by the pattern of development but also the social structure of society. Discuss the statement in context of Indian society. Discuss the statement in context of Indian society. Now, I am not going in detailing of this migration topic because I have already provided you the structure. This is how you can make use of it. Just remember, whenever you are discussing migration, there is always two things which are involved. One is the source region, other is the destination. Obviously, migrant is the permanent feature there. So, source and the destination region, and whenever you are discussing the causes, please discuss it from the perspective of push factor and पुल फैक्टर. एक समझा देती हूं, बाकी आप खुद समझ लेना. जैसे हम इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स की बात करते हैं, सो विद इन इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स द पुश फैक्टर ऑलवेज हैव टू बी नेगेटिवली कोनोटेड. Pull factor is always positive factor which has attracted the person to migrate to their region. Push back is again the negative factor which is pushing you back, and pull back is the positively connoted factor. So just keep that in mind and try to implement that in political capacity as well as socio-cultural. ठीक है? So अगर मैं economic factor की बात करूं तो obviously agriculture is in distress, lack of alternative employment opportunities are there. There is lack of basic infrastructure with respect to education, skill, health, then less remunerative character of agriculture. So all these factors has pushed you to migrate. Now, industrialization, globalization, commercialization of agriculture, better infrastructure, high standard of living, they have been the appealing, attractive factor. They have attracted you towards the destination area. However, in the destination area, the income opportunities were not much. The cost of living was very high. The standard of living was declining. So, as a result, you've been pushed back. Then, most importantly, Delhi में कोई क्यों रहेगा? The health cost is so high. If you see the pollution level, so I'm generally saying, and I remember there was a report which said that in context of people who are residing in Delhi, the life expectancy rate would be 9 years less than the other people in other parts of India. So that is the impact of pollution that is there. So there is a health cost associated. So people are moving back. So what is the pullback factor? For example, the government schemes for socio-economic development of your source region or counter magnet. Actually, counter magnet का मतलब होता है, थोड़ा different समझिएगा. Suburbanization means the normal, gradual proliferation, the organic proliferation which is happening on the fringes of city. Counter magnet is a deliberate intervention. For example, to reduce the pressure on Delhi, we developed Chandigarh. To reduce the pressure on Bangalore, Hyderabad was developed. To reduce the pressure on Mumbai, Pune and Nasik is developed. So when deliberate intervention happens to divert the traffic from the most coveted destination in context of migration is known as counter magnet. Is that very clear? So all these factors govern the economic aspect of migration. Again, one disclaimer, not a sacrosanct list, but enough, good enough to write a 10 marker. Then similarly, you can talk about socio-cultural by differential access to resources based on primordial identities, caste-based division of labor, patriarchy, low status of women due to that. Then pull factor would be urbanism, heterogeneity, anonymity, individualism, marriage. Then pushback, ghettoization, replication of inequalities, lack of cultural integration. Then pullback, feeling of nativism, family reunification. It is easy to understand what is being written. Similarly, political factors. Is that clear? So violence, corruption, development-led displacement. Okay. Similarly, pull factors, you have political freedom, safety, security, good governance has been ensured. Then son of soil theory can be a pushback factor. Then change in political leadership, strengthening of local governance can be a pullback factor. However, the next thing that you talk about is consequences. Whenever you are discussing the question on consequences, there might be a question with respect to consequences of internal migration. So whenever you are discussing the consequences, discuss on the source region, discuss on the destination region, and discuss on the migrants. So when you are discussing on the source region, so what would be the economic consequence? What would be the socio-cultural consequence? What would be the political consequence? What would be the demographic consequence? For example, economic. Obviously, if the people who are migrating are the ones who are employable, are human capital, so there would be a loss of human resource. However, if they are withdrawing or if they are drawing the surplus population, then it would be a win-win situation for the source region. They would also draw the benefits of remittances. In fact, जब ये counter migration हुआ during this COVID period, so obviously the remittances were reduced. As a result, there were many children or many families which were forced to withdraw their children from the education system because there was obstruction of the remittances. Is that very clear? So there are many societies which run on remittances. So for example, Kerala mein to remittances were the life blood of the economy. So this is how it operates. Then demographic consequences in the source region. By male is mostly migrating, often it happens, and even if the male specifically is not migrating, the family is migrating, so often the older people are left behind, right? So in every which capacity, dependent population is increasing, feminization of labor is happening, birth rate is declining, incidences of child labor is increasing, so all of that can be written. Then migration act as an agency of social change. So basically through migration, the new ideas are diffused in the source region. That's a positive thing, right? However, at the same time, if the male, adult male is absent from the family for a very long period of time, it might lead to dislocations of the family. It might lead to increased incidences of violence against women. It might lead to increased dual burden, right? So all of that can be written. Then obviously if the entire people are migrating outside, so obviously there is no one left behind to participate in the political culture, so political representation, participation declines. Then with respect to destination areas, obviously there is a perception that migrants has taken away the jobs of the locals, so often there exists problem of son of soil theory. Often there is exodus of migrants which is happening. Okay. Then there is slum proliferation which is taking place, because I have already told you that there are the chunk of the population which is migrating is working in the informal sector. So if you are working in the informal sector, you cannot afford a decent standard of living. So there is proliferation of slums. There is increase in crime rate, because जब unplanned माइग्रेशन हो रहा है या बहुत रैपिड माइग्रेशन हो रहा है, बहुत कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड या स्क्यूड, दैट वुड बी अ बेटर वर्ड, स्क्यूड माइग्रेशन इज हैपनिंग. सो ऑब्वियसली द डिमांड ऑफ द अपॉर्चुनिटी एंड रिसोर्सेज इज वेरी हाई, whereas the supply is not there. So as a result, there is a feeling of relative deprivation which further manifests itself in the form of increased rate of crime. Is that clear? At the same time, एक तरफ तो मैं कहती हूँ कि the good part is it results into development of cosmopolitan culture, because your mental horizons are getting broadened. You are interacting with people belonging to different cultures, right? So there is kind of unity and diversity thing happening. But that is a very, very optimistic approach. What happens in reality is also that the natives, they kind of insulate themselves from any process of cultural integration. Okay, so that is one of the challenge. So lack of cultural integration of migrants with the native population. Okay? So which we have already talked about. Then obviously the burden is increasing, so even the state administration fails to address the demand of the growing population. Okay? So due to excessive population, it also results into failure of state administrative apparatus. Is that clear? Then problem of skewed sex ratio in case it is male specific migration, which further aggravates the possibility of violence against women. ये एक reason आया था. So it was found that Delhi is a rape capital. So when it was being analyzed that what has resulted into increased incidences of violence against women, specifically rape in context of Delhi, so one of the reason identified was skewed sex ratio. Okay. Now with respect to migrants, अगर in general migrants पे question आ जाए कि consequences discuss करने हैं, तो ऐसा नहीं है सब कुछ negative है, ठीक है? There are positive consequences also. Why are you migrating? It provides you opportunity for social mobility, right? You are interacting with different people, so it results into development of social tolerance. Then since the population is very dense, so the probability of development of social capital is also very high, ठीक है? Urban areas are governed more by secular indicators of status rather than ritual indicators. Ritual मेरा मतलब है caste, gender से ज़्यादा in urban areas, or specifically the desired areas which you are migrating to, they are governed by secular indicators of status, as in your socio-political economic status. So it's a good thing, right? So there are being good impact of migration on migrant population. But that is why you are migrating. However, there is a certain chunk of migrant population which are subjected to lot of exploitation, exclusion. Okay? You can also term them as ghost citizens, specifically when it comes down to seasonal migrants. So first and foremost, if I'm talking about informal sector workers who are not educated, okay, or who are not literate, not aware. So they are devoid of skills, information and bargaining power. Often these migrant workers are caught in the exploitative labor arrangement. There is non-portability of entitlements. There is problem of aggravated, as in the problem further gets aggravated in case of absence of proper documentation. ठीक है, so identity crisis भी हो जाती है, because of which they have been excluded from the social participation, they have been excluded from the political participation, they have been economically exploited. So this problem of identity and documentation is also a major problem. ठीक है, then often these migrant population they become the victim of identity politics. Regional जो parties हैं ये तो survive ही इस बात पे करती हैं that pitting the migrants against the natives. Is that clear? It is often believed that the hardship magnifies when the boundaries are crossed. ठीक है, इनफैक्ट इफ यू रिमेंबर कल हम ट्रैफिकिंग पढ़ रहे थे एंड आई सेड दैट ट्रैफिकिंग में वन ऑफ द मेजर इशू इज माइग्रेशन. सो व्हेन द स्टेट बॉर्डर्स आर क्रॉस्ड और द कंट्रीज बॉर्डर्स आर क्रॉस्ड द वल्नरेबिलिटी ऑफ माइग्रेंट सिग्निफिकेंटली गेट्स एग्रीवेटेड. तो वो यही है. ठीक है, सो द हार्डशिप मैग्निफाइज व्हेन द स्टेट बाउंड्रीज आर क्रॉस्ड. देयर इज ऑल्सो कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ मार्जिनल मैन. मार्जिनल मैन मतलब द पीपल हु आर माइग्रेटिंग एंड इफ द बॉर्डर्स आर क्रॉस्ड, द बाउंड्रीज आर क्रॉस्ड, देयर इज अ stark difference in your culture. So you are not able to leave your traditional culture. At the same time, it becomes difficult for you to integrate yourself in the modern culture or in the new culture, whatever place you are moving to. So marginal man की situation आ जाती है. हिंदी में बोले तो धोबी का कुत्ता, ना घर का ना घाट का. But English में इस concept को बोलते हैं the concept of marginal man. Is that clear? Then obviously I told you in case of seasonal migrants or the temporary circular migrants, they remain out of bounds of government and civil society because of absence of credible data. Is that clear? Then there is problem of intergenerational transmission of poverty, as in the poverty is being transmitted from one generation to another. Another issue is lack of access to resources for basic survival. Is this clear? ठीक है. In the backdrop, you might get a question on migration because specifically of COVID-19, right? That can be a possibility. So already ये issues सब exist कर रहे थे. COVID-19 has further aggravated these issues. First and foremost, there has been uncertainty and desperation. Uncertainty, obviously the media is not providing you the right information. There is misinformation which is being provided with respect to COVID. There have been a lot of news about how people are dying and how they have not been able to meet their family members during their last days, or how the proper funeral was not conducted for many of the people, right? So all of that has created a lot of uncertainty and desperation. Is that clear? ठीक. Then second is obviously एक तो ये लोग out of bounds of civil society हैं. They have not been properly enrolled. The proper data is missing. So, and secondly, they do not have the income opportunities, or they do not have sufficient income to afford already scarce healthcare infrastructure. So that has become a challenge. Then disruption of agricultural cycle. By seasonal migrants होते थे, they used to go back to their agricultural land to basically, you know, harvesting वगैरह के लिए. But because of lockdown and everything, there was a disruption in this agriculture cycle. Then even the source region, the states had closed their border. They were not ready to take these people. Why? Because they were already overburdened. And it was believed that if these people are coming from a certain location, let us say Delhi and everything, they are bringing infection along with them, and the state administration believes that they do not have enough infrastructure to cater to this. So even the source region were not ready to accept their own people. So there were apprehensions from the source region. Then obviously unemployment. Since most of them were recruited in the informal sector, there has been economic disruption and dislocation because of COVID-19. However, there has been some initiatives which have been taken by the government with respect to migrant population. For example, Ujjwala 2.0 की हम बात कर सकते हैं, या वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड की बात कर सकते हैं, या प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण रोजगार अभियान की हम बात कर सकते हैं. So there have been certain initiatives which have been taken with respect to the migrant workers, whether it is Ayushman Bharat, whether it is Ujjwala 2.0, whether it is One Nation One Ration Card, or it is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana. Whenever you are preparing your content, please prepare. I'm time and again saying, I'm saying there is a reason behind that. Often you get a question, what have been the steps taken by the government? ठीक है. For example, in the backdrop of COVID-19, migrants have been one of the most vulnerable section who have borne the major setback due to the pandemic. In this context, what efforts have been taken by the government to ensure their inclusion? Is that very clear? Okay, so you might get, so in that situation, you should know the government steps, and at least in a one statement, you should know what were those steps all about. Okay, तो ये पता होना चाहिए. However, overall, what should be the way ahead? Government ने steps लिए, तो अब आपको पूरा ये structure दिख रहा है. माइग्रेशन क्या होता है, कॉजेस क्या होते हैं, कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस क्या होते हैं, what has been the issues with respect to the migrant population, then with respect to COVID, what has happened, what have been the steps taken by the government, and what should be the overall way forward. There is one act which exists with respect to the migrant population, that is Interstate Migrant Workmen Act of 1979. It needs to be properly implemented. There has to be portability of benefits, there has to be universal food grain distribution, the skills should be provided. ये मैं overall बोल रही हूँ, not just with respect to COVID-19, overall what should be done. So providing them the skills so as to increase their desirability in the labor market, or you should write to in order to decrease their vulnerability. यहाँ पे ये गड़बड़ हो गया, decrease होना चाहिए था, increase नहीं, या फिर vulnerability की जगह desirability लिख सकते हो, ये correct कर लेना. Then active participation of NGOs and civil societies to drive away the mistrust which is existing between natives and migrants. ठीक है? Then कितना भी, see, you need to understand, your approach cannot be that migration needs to be stopped, because migration in itself is a phenomena which is organic in nature. If you do not get desired opportunities to develop, you will tend to migrate, and you do have a fundamental right to migrate. So in that situation, you cannot stop migration, but yes, you can definitely develop your source region so that the rate at which out-migration is happening, it can be slowed down. That is all which can be done. At the same time, destination regions' capacity should also be improved so as to absorb the migrant population. Politicization of migration needs to be checked. There has to be proper, credible data collection with respect to migrant population. Then target specific interventions have to be there, and interstate coordination committees should be established so as to have an idea how much population is out migrating and what is the status with respect to in migrants. Is that clear? Another issue that we have is begging in India. आप पढ़ो. Now with respect to begging, Supreme Court has refused to ban begging. अब एक idea होना चाहिए. Begging is the result of destitution, that is the situation of extreme vulnerability. और begging की क्या definition है, बस पढ़ लेना, इसको याद क्या ही करोगे, मेंस में लिखने मत बैठ जाना. Now, with respect to the destitutes, as in they suffer from multiple jeopardies. For example, homelessness, powerlessness, discrimination, exclusion, lack of access to resources with respect to basic survival. So all of that. However, with respect to, in general, if I have to study the social constituency, as in all those who have been concentrated, if you study the profile, the social profile of these destitute people, you will find person with disability, transgender, women, child, or the person who is suffering from illness such as leprosy, you will find them overly concentrated in this group of destitutes. Is that clear? Now we have certain data with respect to beggars, that more than 4 lakh beggars are there according to census 2011. Do I need to tell, in past 10 years this data have further got increased. The maximum number, there exists regional variations. So UP, Bihar, West Bengal. Now there has been an approach that why begging should not be criminalized, because it goes against the right to life. Let us suppose you criminalize begging. So now you've been left with very uncomfortable choices. Either you commit the crime, that is you beg. And if you don't commit the crime, then you starve to death. So this is very uncomfortable choice which is being provided to the individual. So it goes against the essence of right to life. It violates right to life under Article 21 of your Constitution. Delhi High Court, when had decriminalized begging, it has clearly specified, although we do not have a national act ठीक है, which works on pan-Indian basis. But there is an act, that is Bombay Prevention of Begging Act, which is largely replicated by a lot of states and union territories, approximately 22 states and union territories. 20 or 22, so it has been replicated. So the Delhi High Court judgment clearly specify that the provisions of Bombay Begging Prevention Act जो है 1959 का, it does not stand constitutional scrutiny, because it treats begging as an offense, and which is absolutely wrong. Because when a person, nobody wants to be a beggar, so if a person is forced to begging, it is not an individual act of deviance, so you cannot criminalize it. In fact, it identifies, it highlights the incapacity or inability of the government to provide the resources for basic survival. And at the end of it, under your DPSPs, it is responsibility of the government to ensure social security for all the citizens of the country. So basically, if a person is begging, so that is not the fault of the individual person. It is basically highlighting the inadequacy of the government as well as society to protect its citizens from the adverse circumstances. Is that very clear? And the same was reiterated in Suhail Rashid Bhatt वर्सेस जम्मू एंड कश्मीर स्टेट का जो एक्ट था, जजमेंट था, उसमें भी यही बात क्लियरली लिखी थी दैट इट इज द इनएबिलिटी ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट एंड सोसाइटी टू प्रोटेक्ट द सिटीजंस इन कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ पॉवर्टी एंड दे हैव फेल्ड टू प्रोवाइड देम और गारंटी देम एक्सेस टू रिसोर्सेज फॉर बेसिक सर्वाइवल. और जब आप कोई चीज को क्रिमिनलाइज करते हो, दैट मीन्स यू आर लैकिंग एम्पैथी, यू आर अब्सॉल्विंग द स्टेट फ्रॉम देयर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी to ensure basic minimum living for all its citizens. So it is not right. And also, if a person is forced to beg, what we fail to realize is it is violation of human rights. That means you have failed to address the problem of poverty. Is this clear? So what needs to be done? First and foremost, you need to identify the beggars. You need to issue them the certificates. You have to provide them multi-purpose smart cards. Secondly, there are certain people who know that these set of people are vulnerable. So they try to seek advantage of these vulnerable people. So stringent action should be taken against those people. Then in order to prevent begging and in order to rehabilitate the beggars who have been withdrawn from the begging situation, proper skill, education, vocational training, employment opportunities should be provided to them. And most importantly, there has been certain legislative bill which is pending. For example, the person in destitution bill, it need to see the light of the day. Is that very clear? You might get a question with respect to begging. Then there have been certain state initiatives which have been taken. For example, in context of Odisha, it has been Sahay, and in context of Bihar, it is Mukhyamantri Bhiksha Vritti Nivaran Yojana. So these state examples can be emulated on a pan-Indian basis. And if people who talks about criminalization of begging are giving the argument that there are organized begging rackets which are run or something, so that should be incorporated or dealt under trafficking laws rather than criminalization of begging. Is that very clear? ठीक है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, कल ही हमने ट्रांसजेंडर्स पढ़े थे ना, जिसमें हमने कहा था कि सोशल माइंडसेट एग्जिस्ट इन सच अ वे दैट इवन इफ द ट्रांसजेंडर्स आर क्वालिफाइड, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल दे डोंट हैव एक्सेस टू एजुकेशन, दे हैव बीन शन्ड बाय द फैमिली, बट इवन इफ दे आर क्वालिफाइड दे डोंट हैव एक्सेस टू जॉब बिकॉज देयर एग्जिस्ट अ स्टिग्मा विथ ट्रांसजेंडर्स. सो दे हैव बीन forced to work in low paying or menial jobs. So often you will find transgender concentrated in sex work or begging, right? So if you criminalize begging, do you realize that you are further denying transgenders one or जो वैसे ही handful of opportunities है for their livelihood? By criminalization of begging, you are also denying them that opportunity, right? So criminalization is not a solution. Rehabilitation and prevention is the solution. There has been initiative taken by the government by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. There is a central sector scheme for comprehensive rehabilitation of persons who are engaged in begging. So rehabilitation measures would be provided, medical facility, education, skill development, counseling, economic opportunities, all of that would be provided to them. बस इतना ही पता होना चाहिए. Next topic that we have is manual scavenging, very quickly. So Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has launched Safai Mitra Suraksha Challenge in 243 cities. Their target is to completely eradicate manual scavenging by 2021. The status in India says that Safai Karamchari Andolan, that UP has highest number of insanitary toilets. As on July 2019, a survey was conducted and more than 54,000 people were engaged as manual scavenger. 2013 में आया था कि completely employment of manual scavenger is being prohibited and their rehabilitation के लिए एक proper plan आया था, one time assistance देना, scholarship देना, training देना, stipend देना, concessional loans देना. So the entire policy, the act was there. Then National Commission for Safai Karamchari is there. Then under Article 17, untouchability has been abolished. There have been so many initiatives which have been taken so far. Despite that, according to the survey which was done in July 2019, it was found that more than 54,000 people are working or have been employed as manual scavenger. Is that clear? There have been various government efforts. For example, you have civil society initiatives like Safai Karamchari Andolan by Bezwara Wilson or Rashtriya Garima Abhiyan. Then you have rehabilitation schemes. You have National Commission for Safai Karamchari. Then prohibition of employment as manual scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act, Article 17 of the Constitution. Abhi humne baat kari hai, theek hai? So what is manual scavenging? It's a practice of manually cleaning of human excreta from the dry toilets. Is that clear? Now there was an act which was passed in 2013. This act clearly prohibits employment of manual scavenger or manual cleaning of sewer or septic tanks without any protective equipments. Is that clear? The offence is cognizable, it is non-bailable, it provides clearly for the definition of manual scavenging. Is that very clear? It says it is the responsibility of the local authorities to identify the manual scavenger, and if you are violating the provisions of these act, it would lead to your imprisonment. And in case of subsequent violation, further, the gravity of the punishment and fine has increased. Despite that, and obviously this इसी rehabilitation की मैं बात कर रही थी, अभी मैंने बात की थी ना कि rehabilitation provide कराए, one time assistance दे देंगे, scholarship दे देंगे, residential plots, then skill, then concessional loans, all of that would be provided. Despite that, manual scavenging is still persisting. So what are the factors which are responsible for the persistence of manual scavenging? First and foremost, rigid caste system. If you've studied your caste well, there is a concept of purity and pollution based on which there is occupational division of labor. It is believed that there are certain impurity or polluting activities which are conducted by or committed by the person of upper caste. For example, human excreta. So there has to be someone from the lower caste to absorb that pollution so as to maintain the purity of the upper caste. Based on this idea, there was occupational division of labor, and that is the reason why manual scavenging is still persisting. No matter what laws you bring, no matter what infrastructure you create, if you fail to change the attitude of the society, your laws and policies would not be effective. That is the idea behind this. Okay? Then there is continued presence of insanitary toilets. So, and second is you have lack of proper infrastructure. Then there is lack of judicial implementation of the existing provisions. Is that clear? We have failed to rehabilitate manual scavengers. उसका भी एक रीजन है भाई, manual scavenging तो suppose करो हमने उनको withdraw किया और हमने उनको street vendor बना दिया, that the person is responsible for selling fruits and vegetables. So obviously they would be doing in their locality, right? The local people have a perception that they belong to lower caste, and from them these things have not to be accepted. So as a result, even if you are trying to withdraw them, even if you are trying to provide them alternative source of livelihood, the other society members are not ready to accept them. They are not ready to allow their reintegration in the society. So then they are left with no other option but to sustain their living. They have to go back to these menial jobs. Is that clear? So until and unless attitudinal change is not being brought about, it would be causing failure to rehabilitate the manual scavengers. Then what are the risks which are associated with manual scavenging? Obviously, occupational risk hai. There are a lot of people who have died while cleaning the sewer and septic tanks because there was lack of training, there was lack of protective gear. Then it's a informal nature of work. Obviously, you do not have any kind of legal protection. Then there is multi-generational poverty trap. you have been ostracized by the society. There is large probability of contracting various diseases. Just a sec. ये एक नेशनल कमीशन फॉर सफाई कर्मचारी का वो था, मैंने कल भी बात करी थी ना, when we were discussing National Council for Transgender and everything. This is how you study. What is the mandate, what is the composition, what is the nature. ठीक है? So you can study this. This is just for your reference. So overall, what should be the way forward? Recognize karo all types of sanitation work and provide a framework for empowerment of these workers. Then formalization karo is काम का. Personal protective equipment should be provided. Occupational risk should be mitigated. Technology should be adopted so that manual cleaning is not required. For example, the robot, that is Bandicoot. ठीक है? Then awareness generation should be there with respect to rights and entitlements, and data collection should be there for evidence-based policy making. If you have realized so far in these three classes, there have been certain common points that we are writing. For example, awareness about rights and entitlements, availability of basic infrastructure, right? Then collection of data for evidence-based policy making, right? Then proper evaluation of the existing provisions so as to track the progress, identify the loopholes and plug in the gaps. These are basic points which you are writing in most of your answers. So keep that in your mind. You can't remember every point. So identify those common points which can be written in the answers, and then depending upon the separate topics, you can identify the separate points. Okay? Again, I would just say one thing, I'll reiterate myself, try to have as much as horizontal coverage as possible. Writing more and more points, you don't have to get into the detailing, but writing more and more points, presenting it in a nice manner with all diagrammatic representation, bullet points, a good blend of paragraph writing and bullet points, making those flow charts, schematic representation will definitely fetch you marks, extra marks. In fact, I still remember, before I further continue, I had a friend who always kept on telling me one thing. She cleared the exam in the very first attempt, and her approach and my approach was very different, as it is evident from our result also. I couldn't clear and she cleared in the first attempt. So the approach was very simple. She said, I don't aim to score very high marks or something like that. My aim is, what should I do that in every answer the examiner gives me 1 extra marks? If I deserve to score 5 on a 10, what should I do that I score 6? If I deserve to score, let us say 7 or 8 out of 15 marker, what should I do that I score 1 extra marks? So 1 extra marks in every question fetches you 20 extra marks in every paper. And can you see the difference in your result? So she says that when I have this kind of approach, it eases out the pressure from my mind, because my target is not to score 100 plus in every paper. No. My target is very small, 1 extra marks in every question. So that is how. And every time while thinking about any topic or any effort, she used to focus on, इसमें मैं ऐसा क्या करूं? कौन सी कोट ऐसे के लिए तैयार करूं? कौन सा anecdote तैयार करूं? What kind of presentation, what kind of diagram should I make so that 1 extra marks in every question? Trust me, it will work. If it has worked for others, it will work for you too. Next, Human Capital Index. See, the question is not about the index here. वैसे तो आजकल इंडेक्स पे भी क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं तो कह नहीं सकते, but here my concern is not about the index. My concern is more about human capital. My interest is more about, in the backdrop of demographic dividend, what is the importance of this concept of human capital formation? What are the challenges in human capital formation? That's more of my interest. But anyhow, Human Capital Index is published by World Bank. The title of the report is Human Capital in the Time of COVID-19. About the index in general, what do you mean by human capital? As in, overall, the index is measuring that how much human capital a child who is born today is expected to achieve by their 18th birthday. That is what is the purpose of Human Capital Index. ये यही measure करता है कि the child who is born today, how much human capital the person is expected to achieve by the 18th birthday. तो अब concept आता है, what do you mean by human capital? So the knowledge, skill, health that you have acquired over your lifetime, so that you can realize your complete potential to become the productive asset for your nation. That is the concept of human capital, right? So in simple words, it is about the knowledge, skill and health. Okay. Now, if you see at the components of Human Capital Index, so it talks about survival, it talks about school, and health. These are three dimensions within which you have different indicators like under 5 mortality, expected year of schooling, quality of education, under 5 stunting, or adult survival rate. Now, what is human capital? It consists of, yahi bol rahi thi main, knowledge, skill, health, which a person accumulates over their life, which enables them to realize their potential as the productive member of the society. Now, what are the sources of human capital formation? ये सब आंसर में काम आ सकता है. What do you mean by human capital? What are different sources of human capital formation? For example, the expenditure on or investment in human capital is the need of the hour. ऐसे बन सकता है. तो पता होना चाहिए human capital है क्या. So expenditure on education, health, job training, migration, expenditure on information related to labor market, everything is nothing but a contribution to the formation of human capital. These are certain key findings as far as अगर human capital index report पे question आ जाए जैसे MPI पे आया था तो ये हो सकता है. ठीक है. So it is expected globally 56% of the children will achieve their productive potential. Regional variation exists करता है with respect to high income countries and low income countries. 53% of the children in low and middle income countries are suffering from learning poverty. Learning poverty is lack of ability of a 10-year-old to read and comprehend a simple story. The irony is that human capital is more in girls as compared to boys. But with respect to girls, because of patriarchy, because of lack of opportunities to reap their potential, there is underutilization of human capital. This has been a pandemic impact. It is believed that because of pandemic, whatever progress has been made in past decade with respect to human capital will be overturned. Is that clear? Because more than 1 billion children globally has been out of school. There has been disruptions with respect to essential health services. Then they can, because of reduced learning, because of temporary school closure, dropouts or disproportionate impact on women, their lifetime earnings would be negatively impacted. In fact, because of COVID, there has been increased income inequality and the major burden is being borne by the women and the children from the marginalized section. Is that very clear? So overall, what is the impact of pandemic on human capital? Suppose करो तुमसे question नहीं पूछा जाता human capital index पे, human capital formation पे तो सवाल बन सकता है ना? There can be a question on human capital. So what do you mean by human capital? Then what has been the impact of COVID-19? Write down a question. Define human capital. Define human capital. Full stop. Discuss the impact of COVID-19 on human capital formation. Discuss the impact of COVID-19 on human capital formation. Obviously, essential health services have been disrupted, students have been out of school, then economic dislocations and distress has happened, right? Because of which the learning opportunities for children has declined, dropout rate is high, school have been closed down, disproportionate impact on girls, vulnerability to food insecurity and poverty has aggravated, income inequalities have increased. Okay, so all of that can be written as an impact of pandemic on human capital formation potential. India specific data in general. Okay. So again, you can just have a look at the data. The score has increased. Okay. There has been a decline with respect to stunting. ये तो हमने कल भी बात करी थी कि बस वेस्टिंग बढ़ा है, स्टंटिंग ले लें, अंडर 5 मोर्टेलिटी ले लें, तो वो सब कम हुआ है पहले से. ठीक है. नाउ ह्यूमन कैपिटल के प्रोस्पेक्ट्स क्या है? प्रोस्पेक्ट्स एज एन पॉजिटिव इंप्लीकेशन, इंडिविजुअल लेवल, फैमिली लेवल, societal level and national level. This is a standard way. I prefer this way of writing. You can prefer any other way of writing. Individual level पे अगर human capital formation होता है, obviously it provides opportunity for social mobility. It will provide cognitive development. They will be able to realize their full potential. There would be higher earning, as in the opportunity for economic improvement in their status. They would have the opportunity to become the productive asset for the nation. Family का overall standard of living will improve. Intergenerational returns होंगे. Obviously, if today you are earning well, you will be able to provide better opportunities for your next generation. So it will have intergenerational returns. Then with respect to society, if you are investing in human capital, it will lead to social cohesion. ठीक है. At the same time, it will strengthen people's trust in the institution. Overall, it will lead to development of social capital. At the same time, it is believed that society needs sufficient human capital to further produce human capital. भाई human capital करने के लिए आपको skill चाहिए, education चाहिए, health चाहिए. उसके लिए आपको trainers चाहिए, teachers चाहिए, doctors चाहिए. The human capital is required to further the human capital. Is that clear? Then with respect to nation, obviously it will promote inventions and innovation. It will enable the nation to complement the physical capital. क्योंकि human capital जहाँ develop होता है, the person who has knowledge, the person who has skills or who is healthy can more effectively make utilization of the physical capital. So a person with higher human capital can effectively utilize physical capital. It provides the opportunity to the nation to increase their status on global platform. It also enables the opportunity to the nation to reap the benefits of demographic dividend. In fact, human capital formation acts as a driver for sustainable development, growth, बोल दो, या poverty reduction. Is that clear? There have been various initiatives taken by the government for human capital formation, whether it is Ayushman Bharat, National Education Policy, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan or Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana. However, there are slight problems in development of human capital. तो अगर ऐसे भी आएगा तो भी लिख लोगे. अगर human capital index पे question आएगा, then also you will be able to write. You will be able to write the answer if the question is being asked with respect to impact of pandemic on human capital. So human capital formation में challenges क्या हैं? First of all, the population is increasing. हमने कल ही बात करी है that population when increases, it creates pressure on the existing resources. So per capita availability of resources declines. ठीक है. Then it's a long process. Obviously ऐसा तो है नहीं कि आज मैंने skill दी और कल आप skilled हो गए. So it's a lifetime process. ठीक है. Then gender inequality and regional disparity. That is another challenge. Basically, the social structural realities of India is a major challenge. Then we do not have a concept of on-job training. So regular upgradation of skills, multi-skilling, on-job training, that becomes a challenge. Then poverty level is very high, because of which they do not have access to good qualitative education, skill development and health facilities. The major issue in context of India has been brain drain. Highly skilled labor has often migrated outside, which has slowed down the process of human capital formation in the economy. Then proper manpower planning नहीं है इंडिया में, proper public investment नहीं है. बस अभी next topic हम जो पढ़ेंगे that is health and education only. So there has not been proper investment with respect to health and education. So इन्हीं सब problems का जो solution होगा that would be the conclusion. Let's very quickly come down to the topic of health. Again, one piece of advice with respect to health, whatever datas that you have, stick to those datas. Right? Many a times it happens that economic survey में slightly different data दे रखा है, ठीक है, या family health survey report में slightly different data दे रखा है. So या health in India report थी, उसमें slightly different data दे रखा है. So whichever you are quoting, just make sure that just stick to the data, because every time preparing a new data would not be possible. Just mention the source. For example, economic survey says that approximately 1.8% of GDP is spent on your health. तो totally depends कि आप कहाँ से source कर रहे हो data को, ठीक है. तो ये this is general data. MMR has further declined to 113. तो अब आप पे depend करता है कि आप कौन सा data quote करना चाहते हो, ठीक है. Health insurance coverage देख लो. Insurance Regulatory Development Authority. In fact, economic survey में other way around दे रखा है that 76% have not been covered under any kind of insurance. So you can refer economic survey data as well. Now, in the backdrop of COVID, जब हम healthcare system की बात करते हैं, just for the reference, I don't know how many of you have attended my regular classes or for that matter the essay class or something like that, लेकिन मैं एक idea दे देती हूँ. जब आप health को prepare कर रहे हैं, तो एक holistic तरीके से करिएगा, because health and education becomes very probable topics for your GS paper 2 and they become very probable topics for your essay also. So when you are preparing health, a general piece of advice. Generally telling, this is how one can prepare. For example, if you're preparing health, what's the concept of good health? Then different manifestations, as in how it contributes to social good, political good, ecological good, economic good. Then what are different tiers of healthcare system, primary, secondary, tertiary. Okay. Then issues with respect to healthcare system in general. Then what have been the government efforts? For example, Ayushman Bharat. For example, National Medical Commission Act. Okay. Then what have been the lacunas, as in the analysis of National Medical Commission Act or the analysis of Ayushman Bharat Jan Arogya Yojana. Then what should be the overall way forward? Then Sustainable Development Goal number 3. It has been the question in the past also. For example, I remember in 2015 the question was, what are the Millennium Development Goals related to health and to what extent India has been successful in achieving those goals? Because 15 khatam ho gaya tha, right? Now 2015 mein again the Sustainable Development Goals were laid down. Last year it was expected, क्योंकि 5 साल पूरे हो रहे थे, and they did ask the question that to what extent the new education policy is congruent with the targets mentioned under Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Very expected question. ठीक है. Similarly, on the similar lines, you might get a question on to what extent India is prepared or is on track with respect to achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. It can be related to poverty, it can be related to hunger, it can be related to health, education, gender equality, different things. One piece of suggestion. Last year का Mains 365 is there on the resource tab on Vision platform. ठीक है. उसमें जो ओरिजिनल डॉक्यूमेंट है मीन्स 365 का लास्ट ईयर का, उसमें इफ यू कम टू द एंड ऑफ द डॉक्यूमेंट, उसमें ना 17 के 17 गोल्स का एनालिसिस कर रखा है वेरी ब्रीफली इन अ टैब्यूलर फॉर्मेट. यू डोंट हैव टू डू ऑल द 17 गोल्स, बट यस जस्ट आइडेंटिफाई, चूज एटलीस्ट फर्स्ट 5 कर लो. मतलब if you cannot do all, obviously first 5 are important, you can do it at least from the social capacity. उसमें क्या दे रखा है, what is the goal, what are the targets, what have been the achievements, the steps taken to achieve those targets, what has been the achievement and what more needs to be done. पूरा आंसर दे रखा और एक छोटी सी टेबल के फॉर्मेट में. इट्स वेरी वेल रिटन. सो आई वुड सजेस्ट यू गो बैक to previous years mains 365, that's there on your resource tab, and refer to sustainable development goal from there. Okay, that's just a piece of advice, the rest your choice. Then contemporary issue, universal health coverage, mental health and COVID-19, secondary healthcare has been asked to be focused upon, or digitalization of healthcare, or non-communicable diseases. So depending upon whatever content we have in the material, we will discuss, but this is how holistically you should prepare health as a topic. चलो बहुत जल्दी start करते हैं without wasting any further time. Now with respect to COVID, this is very specific to COVID, that what are the issues with respect to healthcare system. ठीक है, so एक in general बता देती हूँ before we further start. एक second बस. जब भी क्वेश्चन आता है that issues with respect to healthcare system in general, so just use your understanding. First and foremost, there is weak primary healthcare. That is first issue. Second issue that we have is lack of infrastructure. Whether it is hospitals, whether it is hospital beds, then we have lack of health workforce. Both with respect to quantity as well as with respect to quality. Quantity, for every 1,456 person we have one doctor. Ideally it should be for every 1,000. WHO says that approximately 57.3% of the doctors or the medical practitioners do not have the requisite qualification. That means they are nothing but quacks. Low public spending on health. This is one of the major issue. अब इसमें आप डेटा क्या देते हो ये आपकी choice है. Whichever data you want to quote, you can. Another problem is privatization of healthcare. What I mean by privatization of healthcare is that 70% approximately the outpatient care and 60% inpatient care is provided by the private sector. Along with that, there is lack of regulation of private sector. Why? Because health is a state subject. Although there exists an act, that is Clinical Establishment Act, but since it is a state subject, the act is not applicable by all the states in the similar manner. Then there exists rural-urban divide. When you are talking about infrastructure, you can talk about rural-urban divide. You can also talk about regional variations. That's your choice. When you are talking about privatization, you are talking about lack of regulation of the private sector. You can talk about out-of-pocket expenditure. How 60% of the expenditure is out of pocket. How this is responsible for 1/6 of India's poverty. Another problem is that there is growing incidences or disease burden of non-communicable diseases. 60% approximately is the disease burden of non-communicable diseases. However, our focus is not on that. Then there is lack of development of traditional medicinal system. That is another challenge that we have, lack of development of traditional medicinal system. Is this very clear? Then there is problem with respect to medical ethics. There is problem of provider induced demands. There is problem of not recommending generic medicines but the branded medicines. There is lack of research and development. We have to be dependent upon the other countries for, let us say, APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, right? So there are too many points which can be written. Is that very clear? Is it making sense? Okay, I am just giving you an idea that this is how the answer formation can be done, and most of it remains the same. Having discussed this, I'm just really giving you an idea. Now look at it. Now look at this. In general, the health issues remains the same. However, when we are talking about how, or in the backdrop of COVID, what has been the challenges with respect to the healthcare system, first and foremost, obviously basic infrastructure is missing. That was quite evident. There exists rural-urban divide. That was also evident. But third thing, although there has been privatization of healthcare, but the challenge was the private sector, they denied the healthcare, especially to the COVID patients. Especially during first wave, there were many hospitals, the private hospitals, they were closed and they refused to treat the COVID patients. So although so this was a double whammy which happened. On one hand, there is privatization of healthcare. On the other hand, the same private healthcare system refused to provide the aid. Is that very clear? Not only that, there are problems. A general perception was that our urban health infrastructure is good. The problem lies only with the rural infrastructure. However, it was quite evident that there were gaps with respect to even urban health infrastructure. Then there was stigmatization of the frontline health workers. So there was a negative perception which was developing with respect to medical career. There was dysfunctional state of integrated disease surveillance program. ये जो program आया था integrated disease surveillance program, इसका काम था disease trend को monitor करना, detect करना what would be the future trend and accordingly respond करना. But ना ही आपके पास funds है, ना ही infrastructure है, ना ही resources है, ना database है. आप कुछ नहीं कर पाए. So the dysfunctional state of integrated disease surveillance program. Then there was gap with respect to the care for non-COVID patients, right? So that was also emerging as a major challenge. Then there were increased dependence of India on the imports of active pharmaceutical drugs. In fact, in one of the class I had mentioned that हर बात में हम बोल देते China के products को ban कर दो, ban कर दो. We are so dependent on China for active pharmaceutical ingredients. So in fact, on our own, we would not be able to even produce a paracetamol. क्योंकि paracetamol में भी जो API डलता है वो हम China से लाते हैं, right? So that is the situation. Most importantly, we don't have faith in the traditional or alternative medicinal system, because of which preventive care is being denied. It is believed that there is वैसे ही 1.6% है आपकी GDP की spending on health, as against it should be ideally 6%. उस 1.7% या 6% में से भी less than 7% of the money is spent on the preventive care. तो जो मैं points आपको लिख रही थी, वहां पे एक point हम ये भी mention कर सकते थे. अरे, it's not there. There was one more point that overall health is a comprehensive thing. For example, preventive health, promotive health, curative health, and rehabilitative health. Our entire spending and focus is on curative health. इन सब पे तो हम spend नहीं करते हैं. On preventive health care, hardly less than 7% is spent. That is the major challenge with respect to our healthcare system. Is this clear? Further, the lacunas in the healthcare got further aggravated during the period of COVID. So overall, this is very specific to COVID period, that what could have been the solution. Obviously, we need to reduce the chances of hospital acquired infections, ensure that non-COVID patients are not denied services, disruption of immunization as well as other programs needs to be addressed, affordable medicine should be supplied, technology should be used for contact tracing, ठीक है, upgradation of health infrastructure, more focus on primary health care, improve the pharma supply chains, innovations, for example, the concept of mobile hospitals, creation of central bed bureau. Bed कहाँ है यही नहीं पता चल रहा था, तो एक concept of central bed bureau, promote preventive and promotive health care, boost private sector investment through PPP model, regulation of private sector. It's high time. You can't deny. All your life you've been minting money, and when the time came when you should have served the society, you very conveniently refused to do that. So obviously that should not be the case. Then there was a national health policy in 2017 that needs to be implemented. Simple words में बता देती हूँ. उस policy ने कहा था कि whatever, first of all, increase the minimum spending on health health to 2.5% of your GDP. Secondly, whatever you are spending, 2/3 of that should be spent on primary health care. They have talked about focusing on Ayush. They have talked about target-based intervention, and there were targets which were set with respect to IMR, CMR, MMR, HIV infections, and that has to be achieved, right? They have focused on yoga, meditation, physical activities. They have talked about public-private partnership intervention so as to create robust infrastructure. So all of that they have talked about health and wellness centers. So जो आयुष्मान भारत का जो वो component है, health and wellness center, that was basically the result of the national health policy, that there should be free availability of essential diagnostic services and drugs. ठीक है, so उसकी बात करी थी. Then creation of centralized health management information system. तो जो आपका ये national digital health mission का concept है, that is a welcome step with respect to creation of health management information system. पर ऐसा नहीं है ये कोई पहला step है. इससे पहले भी मैं पढ़ा चुकी हूँ. जब मैंने तैयारी शुरू करी थी, as in पढ़ाना शुरू करा था, तब एक concept आया था नेहा, National E-Health Authority. उसके 2 साल बाद, when I was again teaching the same health topic, so there was nothing new thing, that was National Health Stack. Now there is a new thing, National Digital Health Mission. I just hope it finally gets implemented और कोई नई चीज ना आ जाए. Then there is a concept called universal health coverage. So you might get a question, universal health coverage, prospects, issues and challenges. You might get an essay topic, or you might get a question, what do you mean by universal health coverage? Briefly discuss the challenges in achieving universal health coverage and also suggest few measures. So you might get questions on these lines. Okay. Can we start? So what is universal health coverage? It basically talks about providing 4AQ, available, accessible, affordable, qualitative healthcare services. No one shall be denied healthcare services on the basis of their socio-economic background. The protection would be provided to the people against any kind of financial risk, right? So in simple words, it talks about comprehensive healthcare system would be provided to all at an affordable price in a qualitative manner, irrespective of their socio-economic background. So equity in health services, quality in health services, and protection of people against any kind of financial risk is universal health coverage for you. Now, what are the prospects of universal health coverage? If we are able to ensure good, qualitative, affordable care for every section of society, it will definitely act as a catalyst for socio-economic development. It will help us realize the potential of human capital formation. It will ensure social justice, inclusive growth. It will bring an end to extreme poverty, the poverty which is caused because of the high burden of the health cost. It will enable us to achieve various sustainable development goals. However, there are certain barriers or challenges in achieving universal health coverage. और अभी हमने सारे points discuss करें, वही same points आप यहाँ लिख सकते हो. Government expenditure नहीं है, low concept or narrow understanding of concept of good health है. For us, good health means absence of diseases. So that is the major problem. Adequate infrastructure नहीं है, we have already told you, चाहे वो workforce हो, चाहे वो infrastructure हो, चाहे वो regional divides हो, rural urban divide हो. Then integrated platform नहीं है for data, privatization है, out of pocket expenditure है, less use or lack of use of generic medicines है, health insurance नहीं है. I've already told you, right? Insurance is missing. So economic survey says 76% of the population is not covered under any kind of insurance. With respect to rural, urban divide also exists. For example, in rural areas, only 14% of the population is covered under some form of insurance, health insurance, and in urban areas, only 19% of the population. Rest of them are not covered. So obviously the disease burden, the economic cost associated with it further gets aggravated. Is this clear? So what should be the overall way forward as far as universal health coverage is concerned? One needs to ensure community participation of all the stakeholders. There should be proper training, skilling, retaining, or just a sec guys, of all the health workers. Health promotion and disease prevention. Good health के concept को promote करो. Yoga, meditation, physical activities, having nutritious food, and डिजीज को प्रिवेंट करो बाय इंश्योरिंग एक्सेस टू सेफ ड्रिंकिंग वाटर, प्रॉपर सैनिटेशन, प्रॉपर हाइजीन एक्सेट्रा, ठीक है, या इम्यूनाइजेशन, वैक्सीनेशन एक्सेट्रा. Then strengthening of legislative or the regulatory framework, robust health information system, multi-sectoral approach and more budgetary allocation. Multi-sectoral approach से मेरा यही मतलब है कि if you want to ensure good health, सिर्फ infrastructure create कर देने से नहीं होगा. You should have proper ASHA workers, you should have proper primary health care center, you should have proper sanitation. Jal Jeevan mission is equally important here. Right. In fact, Ujjwala Yojana is also a part of it. If you have access to clean cooking fuel, obviously the incidences of respiratory problems will decline. So it has to be a multi-sectoral approach. ठीक है? तो स्वच्छ भारत मिशन, जल जीवन मिशन, उज्ज्वला योजना, everything forms a part of it. Then next thing, secondary healthcare in India. I've already told you there are 3 tiers, primary, secondary and tertiary. So secondary healthcare is the second tier of the healthcare system where often the patients are sent on the referral basis from the primary healthcare. Is that very clear? It is provided by the district or the regional hospitals. For the very first time, Niti Aayog along with WHO India and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has released a performance assessment report with respect to secondary healthcare in India. That's a good step because finally we are moving towards data-driven governance. Now, they have identified what are the challenges with respect to secondary healthcare in India. First of all, accessibility, availability, specifically in context of rural areas. क्योंकि अगर मैं रूरल अर्बन डिवाइड की बात करें, अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ रिसोर्सेज की बात करें, एक्सेसिबिलिटी की बात करें, so that becomes a challenge because majority of your doctors, majority of your hospitals and dispensaries are located in urban areas. So the availability, accessibility of the healthcare system is a challenge specifically for the rural population. Secondly, there is non-availability of skilled workforce in the public health system. So that is why people are left with no choice but to avail the private healthcare, which is very costly or unaffordable. Then the third problem is why the burden on secondary healthcare is increasing. That's more because our primary healthcare system is weak. Usually it is said that the system, the healthcare system should look like this, with maximum focus on primary healthcare, then secondary and then tertiary. So if you have a robust primary healthcare system, it will serve two purposes. One, the pressure on secondary and tertiary healthcare would be declined. Why? Because majority of the patients would be filtered at the level of primary healthcare. And secondly, if your primary healthcare system is robust, there will be early identification and detection of any disease or any issue. So the probability or the chances of gravitating to a severe disease or terminal illness would be less. Okay. So this way a robust primary healthcare system can be effective to reduce the pressure on secondary and tertiary healthcare. In India, the system looks like this. You have minimum focus on primary healthcare. That is why the problems have gone to such an extent. They have aggravated. Is this clear? Then obviously unmanageable patient load. It's not because of COVID. It was believed that even before COVID, the patient load was unmanageable. Is that clear? Then obviously there is problem of weak governance and accountability. Proper social auditing वगैरह नहीं है. अगर कोई report करता भी है, whistle blow करता भी है, तो that person is being, penalized for that. So we have Gorakhpur tragedy that happened. There were at least, I think 4 or 5 years back की बात है कि छत्तीसगढ़ में there was sterilization camp which was organized and there were a lot of women who died in that. ठीक है, I think Bilaspur district था. So the point which I'm trying to make here is that there is lack of proper governance, accountability and responsibility in the absence of any social audit mechanism. Then obviously government spending on healthcare is less. Then we are not prepared to handle any situation of pandemic. So there was Global Health Security Index which was published. So it was actually measuring the preparedness of the country to manage the pandemic. India's ranking is low. It is 57. as compared to US, which is 1, and Brazil is 22. Is this very clear? Then overall, what should be the way forward? This is what we have been talking about again and again. It's high time start concentrating on promotive and preventive healthcare. So sanitation, hygiene, safe drinking water, eating good nutritious food. So promote and preventive healthcare is the need of the hour. And a good step which has been taken is, for example, the Health and Wellness Center under Ayushman Bharat, they can become the center of disease prevention. Then better patient management should be done at the level of primary health care. So primary health care पे आप टेक्नोलॉजी वगैरह यूज कर सकते हो, टेलीमेडिसिन कॉन्सेप्ट इंट्रोड्यूस कर सकते हो, आशा वर्कर्स को और इंसेंटिव दे सकते हो, ठीक है. यू कैन स्ट्रेंथन योर आशा वर्कर्स, ऑक्सिलरी नर्स, मिडवाइव्स. यू कैन इन्वॉल्व द लोकल कम्युनिटीज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ PRIs, SHGs, ठीक है, दैट इन ऑर्डर टू ensure effective healthcare service delivery system. Then obviously you need to increase the insurance coverage, for which Ayushman Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is a good step. Then overall the government health spending should be increased. वैसे तो ideally कहा जाता है, given the nature of our population and the nature as in the age structure, it is very important to invest in health and education, and it should be minimum 6% of your GDP, both for education as well as health. Education में we are spending around 3%, and with respect to health it is hardly 1.6%. So that is the tragedy. Is that clear? Okay, so overall this should be the way forward. If you've noticed, way forward doesn't change. अभी हमने यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ कवरेज का वे फॉरवर्ड करा था, हमने ये बातें नहीं करी थी इंश्योरेंस कवरेज बढ़ा दो, प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर सेंटर को रोबस्ट कर दो, ठीक है, प्रॉपर ट्रेनिंग वगैरह इंश्योर कर दो, या फिर गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग बढ़ा दो, प्रमोटिव प्रिवेंटिव हेल्थ केयर पे फोकस करो. वे फॉरवर्ड मोस्टली सबका सेम ही रहता है, ठीक है, थोड़ा बहुत ध्यान दे देना बस. This is just for the reference that in case the question comes with respect to analysis of the functioning of the ASHA workers. So that's for you to study. I am not going into the detailing of it, but just for your reference, who are ASHA workers? What have been the function of ASHA workers? Jaldi se have a look at it. So the concept of ASHA workers was introduced as a part of National Rural Health Mission. They are primarily the resident of village in this age bracket. They should be literate with education up to 8th class, and they are acting as a resource person, Anganwadi workers and all, for the training of ASHA workers. Overall, ASHA workers primary health care के लिए work करते हैं, and चाहे safe delivery हो, चाहे बेसिकली मैटरनल एंड चाइल्ड हेल्थ केयर, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग हो, इम्यूनाइजेशन हो, अवेयरनेस जनरेशन विद रिस्पेक्ट टू हाइजीन, न्यूट्रिशन. तो अगर आपको प्रमोटिव प्रिवेंटिव हेल्थ केयर प्रमोट करना है, इफ यू हैव टू स्ट्रेंथन योर प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर, द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट agent to do that is the ASHA workers. So you need to invest in ASHA workers. Is that very clear? So for minor ailments, primary medical care provide करा लेते हैं, फिर comprehensive plan develop करते हैं by working with the village health and sanitation committees. They have played a very significant role during COVID. First of all, by generating awareness, they have tried to bust the myth. They have also tried to promote the preventive care. ठीक है? Then overall surveillance have been ensured. For example, any kind of psychosocial care हो गया, stigma, discrimination की problem, they have addressed that. Then they have continued to provide the maternal and the child health care. Then household survey has been done with respect to tracking, tracing, detecting the incidences of COVID. Then creation of quarantine centers, so or installation of Arogya Setu app. So they have provided all possible means of assistance. But despite that, there were certain challenges which were faced by ASHA workers. They were not being provided the protective gear, and that is the reason why they were protesting. There was the professional stigma which was associated with them. There was no social security which was provided. In fact, a lot of workers, they died. And there were caste issues involved. Basically, it is often found that the female belonging to lower caste is performing in the capacity or acting in the capacity of ASHA workers. Then there was gender stereotyping. अब पहले क्या होता था? It was very easy for ASHA workers to interact with the women because men used to go outside and work. ठीक है? We do not have a concept of male ASHA workers, which is the current demand. Now, because of lockdown, because of being quarantined, the men are present in the household only. So now it has become challenge for the ASHA workers to interact with the females because of constant pressure of men at home. then there is lack of training with respect to what kind of information has to be provided in context of COVID-19. तो ना protective gear दिया, ना allowance दिया, ना preference to food दिया, ना training दी, ठीक है, stereotyping अलग हो गया, social security दी नहीं. There was always a constant fear. In fact, because of this, lot of problem of mental health has emerged. We'll just discuss in another 5-10 minutes. Why? Because there was a constant fear of they contracting the infection. There was a constant fear that they would be transferring the infection, transmitting the infection to their family members. There was a constant pressure because of so many people dying while they were working on field. So all of that, and in the absence of any social security measures, it had created a lot of stress, anxiety on these frontline workers. So what should be the way forward? Overall, by proper training though, financial incentives though, community support though, the community for which they are working, those community are only discriminating against them, stigmatizing them. So better pay, health insurance, all of that needs to be provided to these people. Then the next topic that we have is Ayushman Bharat analysis. Is Barka Economic Survey has given a lot of detailing about the analysis of Ayushman Bharat. So you might get a question, you never know. वैसे आयुष्मान भारत पे एक बार यूपीएससी आई थिंक 2 साल पहले जब लॉन्च किया था तभी सवाल पूछ चुका है, बट लेट अस सी. So Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, it's fully funded by central government. The cost of implementation, however, would be shared by central and the state government. It's a centrally sponsored scheme. The objective is to provide the health insurance coverage of 5 lakh per family per year for overall care. Okay? And the idea why this was launched was based on the recommendation of National Health Policy. यही मैं आपसे कह रही थी, वो health and wellness center and everything. ठीक है ना? So to achieve universal health coverage, to provide promotive, preventive and ambulatory care at all levels. So with this objective, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana was launched. ठीक है? It has subsumed the existing Yojana, that is Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana and Senior Citizen Health Insurance Scheme. The implementing agency would be the National Health Authority. There is no cap on the family sizes. The identification of beneficiaries through socio-economic caste census. Both public as well as private impaneled hospitals would be there. Cashless, paperless access है. 3 दिन का pre hospitalization care and 15 days post hospitalization expenses would be covered. Now how they want to implement the scheme, the ultimate choice lies with the state. What are the prospects of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana? Obviously, it will help us achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 3. It will help us achieving in Sustainable Development Goal number 1, universal health coverage. It will strengthen the public healthcare infrastructure. A new health infrastructure in remote areas would be created. It will ensure improved accessibility as well as affordability to secondary and tertiary care. The burden of out-of-pocket expenditure will reduce. The overall quality of life will improve. It will create potential for transformation of human resource into human capital, and finally will contribute to the economic growth of the nation. So that are the prospects as well as with respect to Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. You could have done it in the capacity of the individual prospect, the prospect at the social level as well as at the national level. Completely your choice. You could have also done the economic prospect, the social prospect. ठीक है ना? So in that capacity also, it or the individual prospect, it could have been written. The same points could be bifurcated on those lines. So with respect to analysis, first of all, what has been ensured so far? So far there has been consolidation of the existing health insurance schemes. For example, in Karnataka, the existing 7 schemes has been merged. अच्छी चीज है ना, duplication नहीं होगा, easy to ensure accountability and responsibility होगी. So consolidation of schemes have happened. It will also reduce the unnecessary expenditures. Then Kerala has also dovetailed their 3 different health schemes. So that's a good thing which has happened. There are certain states and union territories which have expanded the coverage of Ayushman Bharat to make it universal. That is not on the basis of identification of beneficiaries through SCCC. It is made available to every citizen of their state. Then obviously there have been strong monitoring of the transactions. It has been able to locate any kind of suspicious incidences. So the hospitals who have been involved in unethical practices have been blacklisted. There are approximately 12.6 crore cards, e-cards, which have been issued under Ayushman Bharat. So aisa nahi hai, the things are going in right direction. However, there are certain concerns. The certain concerns are the states who are doing well are basically the rich states, the better performing states. There is one exception, that is Chhattisgarh. Otherwise, it is only the rich states which are faring well with respect to implementation of Ayushman Bharat. Then obviously there is lack of regulation with respect to private sector. That will always remain a challenge because health is a state subject. So either you ensure pan-India basis implementation of Clinical Establishment Act, or you come up with certain arrangement, or you shift health into a concurrent list. Something has to be done. Okay? Then obviously whatever budgetary allocation has been done is not sufficient. At the end of it, ek baat hai, this is smart city concept. It was a very good concept. But then what was the major lacunas why we have not been able to achieve it? The major problem was funding, and major problem was the trained professionals, right, who would be implementing the idea of smart cities. Similarly, Ayushman Bharat appears very good on the paper, but again the challenge is that we don't have requisite funds, and secondly, impaneled hospitals hai kahan? मतलब इन्होंने ना criteria दिया है that only you can avail the benefits in impaneled प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स. तो इम्पैनलमेंट के लिए ना कुछ क्राइटेरिया होता है कि दिस इज द बेसिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर विच हैज टू बी देयर, प्रॉपर एम्बुलेंस हैज टू बी देयर, द इमरजेंसी केयर सर्विसेज शुड बी देयर, इतने डॉक्टर होना ही चाहिए, एक स्पेशलिस्ट होना चाहिए, एक एनेस्थीसिया देने के लिए होना चाहिए, एक गायनोकोलॉजिस्ट, एक तो इस तरह. तो लिस्ट ही पूरी नहीं हो रही है, सिर्फ 3% हॉस्पिटल्स हैं जो एलिजिबल हैं टू बी इम्पैनल्ड. सो द प्रॉब्लम लाइज अगेन विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. सो द आइडिया इज गुड, बट यू डू नॉट हैव द प्राइवेट हेल्थ केयर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. Most importantly, there are the major hospitals have not availed the certification, the quality certification by the accreditation board for hospitals. Then we do not have a credible data. That is another problem. The most important problem जिसकी वजह से राष्ट्रीय स्वास्थ्य बीमा योजना भी फेल कर गई थी, that ऐसे क्या होता है कि हमको in order to avail the benefits of insurance scheme you have to go for inpatient care, right? So बहुत बार क्या होता था कि जो outpatient होते थे they used to get themselves converted into inpatient so as to avail the benefits of the insurance. अब उसकी वजह से क्या होता है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर तो ऐसा नहीं है अनलिमिटेड है, there is limited infrastructure. So there were genuine cases who do not find hospital beds, right, who actually are in need. Why? Because these outpatient people have got themselves converted into inpatient just to receive the benefit of the insurance. Then another problem is ghost beneficiaries, जो हमने कोविड में देखा, क्योंकि कोविड में सरकार दे रही थी हॉस्पिटल्स को, so there were too many list of ghost beneficiaries also being created in both the ways. One, they were not reporting the actual COVID cases, and in some places the people were not the COVID patient, but it was mentioned under that so that they can avail the benefit from the government, the hospitals. So there have been problem of ghost beneficiary. There has been deliberate conversion of outpatient into inpatient, then provider induced demands. The hospitals were providing treatment for the diseases for which they are not even equipped. Is that very clear? So all these challenges are the major concerns in the process of success of Ayushman Bharat. So overall, what needs to be done? Health को concurrent list में ले आओ, real time data analysis collection करो, so as to ensure proper analysis of implementation of the scheme, as well as in case there are any loopholes that needs to be plugged in. Strict action law against those hospitals who are getting involved in the malpractices of provider induced demand, inflated bills, you know, all of that. Then every hospital needs to have a quality certificate that will be issued by the National Accreditation Board for Hospitals. Then regional variations needs to be addressed, and they are saying कि government hospitals में तो वैसे भी subsidized rate है और free of cost services are available. So you can exclude this from the ambit. In fact, more focus has to be there on the private hospitals, because majorly it is the privatized healthcare system which is there in India. Remember, 70% of outpatient and 60% of the inpatient care. The next thing that we have in the content is National Medical Commission Act. Now, overall, in order to improve the quality of the medical education system, as well as to do away with any kind of unethical practices, proper regulatory system and everything, the National Medical Commission Act was passed, and it deals with medical education system, and it also deals with establishment of National Medical Commission. So with respect to medical education system, ये कुछ points हैं कि चाहे adequate number, that is the quantity and quality of the medical professionals. तो जो भी हमने रिमेंबर चैलेंजेस लिखे थे, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं है, दैट विल बी एड्रेस. फिर हमने कहा था रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट नहीं है, तो मेडिकल रिसर्च होनी चाहिए. देन ऑब्वियसली द प्रॉब्लम लाइज विद द क्वालिटी ऑफ एजुकेशन, सो प्रॉपर असेसमेंट ऑफ द मेडिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन, एंड इन केस देयर इज एनी प्रॉब्लम देन प्रॉपर ग्रीवांस redressal mechanism has to be there. So with respect to medical education system, these are the 4 points that you need to remember. So whether it is quality or quantity of the professionals, whether it is the research work, whether it is the assessment of the institution or grievance redressal, that needs to be kept in mind. Then with respect to National Medical Commission, उन्होंने clearly बताया है कि members कौन होंगे, क्या composition होगा, क्या function होगा, and they have to make sure that within the 3 years of implementation of the act, every state should have a medical council. Then with respect to NMC, just a piece of information that what should be the composition, ये आप खुद पढ़ लेना. What should be the composition, who are the members, ठीक है. बस इसमें इतना ध्यान रखना कि जो 25 members हैं, it will be appointed by central government. So there is centralization which is happening, right? Then the search committee जो है, that would also be nominated by the central government, which would be recommending the name of the chairperson and everything. Is that clear? ओवरऑल हम क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस में ये पॉइंट्स डाल देंगे. ओवरऑल अगर मैं फंक्शनिंग की बात करूं, सो दे वुड बी रेगुलेटिंग द मेडिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन एज वेल एज द प्रोफेशनल्स. दे विल बी असेसिंग द रिक्वायरमेंट विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू ह्यूमन रिसोर्स एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. They will ensure that the state medical councils are complying with the policies and provisions, and they will also frame the guidelines to determine the fee up to 50% seats in the private medical institutions. This has also been criticized that it will disincentivize the private sector to enter into the or to venture into the medical education. Okay? So this has been criticized, but anyhow we'll see the criticism. The good thing is that NMC में there are 4 autonomous boards and there are 4 verticals to be very precise, so that there is no duplication of work, there is easy accountability. So you have undergraduate medical board, postgraduate, you have medical assessment and rating board, and you also have ethics and medical registration board. So these are the autonomous boards. However, the members and the president of these boards would be appointed by central government. Again, there is centralization. Then there are provisions for medical advisory council, which would be serving dual objective. One, to advise National Medical Commission, and secondly, to act as a linking pin, a buffer, where the states and UTs can convey their concerns to National Medical Commission. They also have the power to issue limited licensing to mid-level medical practitioners, where they can prescribe few specific medicines with respect to primary and preventive health care. वो जो workforce का shortage है ना, उसको address करने के लिए. Now, what is the analysis of National Medical Commission? So good thing is the members have to declare their assets at the time of joining and at the time of leaving. They have to serve a 2-year cooling off period so that conflict of interest doesn't happen, and to maintain transparency and accountability. Then there is clear separation of functions. 4 autonomous boards are there. Then also there is non-opaque functioning, as in the transparent functioning is there because you have medical assessment and rating board. However, the challenge is that in context of MCI, जो Medical Council of India थी, 70% of the members were elected. But now the majority of the members are nominated by the central government. Only 20% of them are elected. पहली चीज. दूसरी चीज है कि जो ये National Medical Commission है, इसका जो ethics board है, that is exercising jurisdiction over state medical councils. So it goes against the federal setup. Then there is limited representation of states. Then most importantly, there is greater control of the central government with respect to both appointment as well as with respect to the removal. There is absence of any kind of appellate authority. There is lack of diverse stakeholders because 2/3 of the members are the medical practitioners. And the last point I have already discussed with you. Negative impact padega in their participation or venturing into the medical education because fee regulation is there. Is this clear for everyone? Can we proceed? Now, what do we mean by digitalization of healthcare? देखो जल्दी से. Integration of medical knowledge with IT application is known as digitalization of healthcare. Or basically, information technology is being used for improving the medical care. So that can also be referred as digitalization of healthcare. It includes e-insurance, it includes e-pharmacy, telemedicine, ठीक है, या फिर electronic health records. So you should exactly know what do we mean by digitalization of healthcare. Now what are the prospects? Obviously, अगर हम टेलीमेडिसिन वगैरह का कॉन्सेप्ट इंट्रोड्यूस कर देंगे तो एक्सेसिबिलिटी टू रिमोट एरियाज, दैट प्रॉब्लम कैन बी रिजॉल्व्ड. जो ह्यूमन रिसोर्स का गैप एग्जिस्ट करता है, दैट प्रॉब्लम वुड बी रिजॉल्व बाय इंश्योरिंग ऑप्टिमम यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ द एग्जिस्टिंग मैन power or the workforce. ठीक है. Then because you have all the data, electronic health records and everything is being provided to you, so that can be used for evidence-based policy making. You will have data, you know, you could predict that in case any, remember that surveillance disease program, integrated disease surveillance program, कि आपके पास अगर data होगा, you would be able to analyze the data, you would be able to detect what can be the future trends and accordingly the intervention can be made. Is that clear? Then the portability in the provision of healthcare services can be ensured. Most importantly, the problem with respect to accessibility in rural areas can be resolved. Then there can be enhanced efficiency with respect to healthcare delivery. It will improve patient safety by providing access to the health records and overall the health cost would be reduced. I'll tell you what I mean by this. If you have a centralized database, अब क्या होता है, suppose करो आप एक डॉक्टर के पास गए, the doctor has asked you to conduct few tests and the tests have been conducted but you did not avail any benefit, as in you were not, you did not get any relief from the medication. So you decided to visit some other doctor. The other doctor again prescribed you certain tests. So the point here is it is actually leading to delay in healthcare also, right? It is also leading to duplication of tests. It is also creating a burden on your pocket. So if you have a proper electronic health record about all the tests, all the reports, all your vitals, right? So it will result into quick action with respect to healthcare and it will also reduce the burden of the health cost. So every which way, it's a good thing. Okay. However, there are certain challenges. Computerization है कहाँ? Underdeveloped infrastructure है, fragmented healthcare delivery system है, ठीक है? Health is a state subject. So pan-Indian basis पे you can prepare an overall framework. How would you ensure that all the states are implementing the framework in the same capacity? That becomes a challenge. Then we do not have a dominant health IT entrepreneur. अगर कोई डोमिनेंट प्लेयर्स होते हैं मार्केट में, सो ऑब्वियसली इट इंश्योर्स दैट एडिक्वेट कैपिटल इज बीइंग प्रोवाइडेड एंड कंटिन्यूअस बेसिस पे इनोवेशन करने के लिए यू हैव प्रॉपर फाइनेंस. सो द प्रॉब्लम इज लैक ऑफ डोमिनेंट हेल्थ आईटी एंटरप्रेन्योर्स. देन ऑब्वियसली डेटा सेफ्टी का प्रॉब्लम है, इंफॉर्मेशन स्टैंडर्ड्स का प्रॉब्लम है, इंटरनेट एक्सेसिबिलिटी का प्रॉब्लम है. दीज आर सम बेसिक प्रॉब्लम्स विच कैन बी आइडेंटिफाइड. ठीक है, सो क्या करें? Overall, we need to make sure that we are making use of best possible use of the digital interventions. For example, e-pharmacy के concept को आप link कर सकते हो प्रधानमंत्री जन औषधि परियोजना से, so that low cost generic drug is being made available at doorstep. That's a good thing which can be done. Then आप एक model digital health center create कर सकते हो in rural settings. And one model center is being created, it would become easy for other people to replicate that example. Again, it's a good step. Then telemedicine setup should be created at primary healthcare centers, health and wellness centers, as well as sub-centers, so that accessibility is not a problem. ठीक है. Then obviously the consent, in order to ensure that data is being protected, the data theft doesn't take place. So legitimate consent of the patient has to be taken before sharing their health records. Similarly, in order to create a centralized database, Aadhaar can be used to digitalize all the data with respect to the patients which are available either with the government hospital or private hospital or the individual practitioners, or with, you know, the dispensaries and all. Is that very clear? Okay. Now, on this line, we have National Digital Health Mission. So very briefly, National Digital Health Mission is a voluntary healthcare program which aims to reduce the gap between different stakeholders, चाहे hospitals हो, doctors हो, citizens हो, and एक integrated digital health infrastructure provide करना है so as to achieve the objective of universal health coverage. ये क्यों बता रही हूं? Easy हो जाएगा कि अगर हम डिजिटल हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की बात कर रहे हैं तो उसमें क्या क्या हम डाल सकते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ये जो नेशनल डिजिटल हेल्थ मिशन है, दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट क्रिएटिंग अ हेल्थ फैसिलिटी रजिस्टर, दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट डिजी डॉक्टर, दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट पर्सनल हेल्थ रिकॉर्ड्स, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मेडिकल रिकॉर्ड्स, एज वेल एज द कंसेंट management and gateway. So if you look at it, health facility register मतलब repository of all the health facilities, चाहे public हो चाहे private हो. Digi doctor का मतलब है कि जितने भी doctors आपके enrolled हैं with all their necessary qualification, एक जगह पे आपको सारे doctors मिल जाएंगे. पर्सनल हेल्थ रिकॉर्ड का मतलब होता है ई रिकॉर्ड ऑफ द हेल्थ इंफॉर्मेशन ऑफ एन इंडिविजुअल विच इज ड्रॉन फ्रॉम द डिफरेंट sources. Is that very clear? However, it will be managed, controlled by the individual. So without their consent, you cannot access their data or their personal information, and it will be seen by the consent manager and gateway. So the legitimate consent would be taken before sharing their data, so the data privacy would be taken care of and data theft would be minimized. Is that clear? इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मेडिकल रिकॉर्ड का मतलब है जब आप किसी हॉस्पिटल वगैरह में एडमिट होते हो तो आप देखते होगे कि जो आपका हॉस्पिटल बेड होता है वहां पे एक चार्ट रखा होता है, जो आपका चार्ट प्रिपेयर्ड होता है, तो वही उसको डिजिटाइज करने की बात कर रहे हैं. द डिजिटल वर्जन ऑफ पेशेंट्स चार्ट. Here the information is taken from one single health facility, whereas personal health record में the e-record of all your health information which is sourced from the multiple resources. Is that very clear? और health ID इंडिविजुअल को खुद क्रिएट करनी होती है ऑन अ वॉलंटरी बेसिस. इज दिस क्लियर? बेनिफिट्स है, इंक्लूसिव हेल्थ केयर है, बेटर विजुअलाइजेशन यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ डेटा है, इफेक्टिव इंप्लीमेंटेशन हो जाएगा, बेटर इन्फॉर्म डिसीजन मेकिंग. भाई आपके पास सारे डॉक्टर्स की इंफॉर्मेशन है, आपके पास सारे हॉस्पिटल्स की इंफॉर्मेशन है, वहां पे क्या क्या रिव्यू आया हुआ है for all the doctors, what are their necessary requisite qualification. So informed decision making can happen. The healthcare services overall can be improved, whether it is continuum of care, whether it is with respect to reimbursements or interventions or better consumer experience, everything would be ensured. So that's a good thing about National Digital Mission idea, health mission idea. फ्रॉड डिटेक्शन इजी हो जाएगा, मेडिकल टूरिज्म बूस्ट होगा क्योंकि कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव हेल्थ केयर है, फ्रॉड नहीं है, गुड क्वालिटेटिव एक्सेसिबल केयर है. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? इट विल इनेबल अस टू अचीव यूनिवर्सल हेल्थ कवरेज. बट अगेन द चैलेंज रिमेन्स द सेम. कहने का मेरा मतलब है कि अगर डिजिटलाइजेशन ऑफ हेल्थ केयर पे क्वेश्चन आए तो आंसर कैसे लिखना है, और अगर स्पेसिफिकली दे आस्क यू द एनालिसिस ऑफ नेशनल डिजिटल हेल्थ मिशन, देन हाउ द आंसर हैज टू बी रिटन. इफ यू लुक एट द पॉइंट्स, देयर इज स्लाइट डिफरेंस. एक हेल्थ इज अ स्टेट सब्जेक्ट, कॉमन है. फ्रैगमेंटेड हेल्थ केयर डिलीवरी सिस्टम है, कॉमन है. डिजिटल डिवाइड एग्जिस्ट करता है, हमने ऑलरेडी बात कर ली है. कंप्यूटराइज नहीं है, इंटरनेट एक्सेसिबिलिटी नहीं है. अगर फिजिकल एक्सेसिबिलिटी हो भी तो यू डोंट हैव द स्किल एंड रिसोर्सेज टू यूज दैट. द प्रॉब्लम्स रिमेन्स द सेम. सिमिलरली डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इज वेरी कॉस्टली, सो दैट ऑल्सो बिकम्स द चैलेंज. फिर हमारे पास स्किल्ड लेबर नहीं है. देन प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम में हम टेलीमेडिसिन एस्टैब्लिश करना चाहते हैं, बट प्राइमरी हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम ओवरऑल इज वेरी इनएडिक्वेट. यू डू नॉट हैव क्वालिटेटिव हेल्थ केयर personals, you do not have facilities, the technology that you are using is obsolete, you do not have proper means of data collection, so again it becomes a challenge. Then जो healthcare service providers हैं, they are also not very okay with the fact, because they also believe it might lead to increased incidences of litigation, it might result into administrative burden. Is that clear? Then obviously, चाहे आप कितना भी कंसेंट मैनेजर और गेटवे लगा दो, देयर इज ऑलवेज एन इशू विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द प्राइवेसी रिगार्डिंग द डेटा रिकॉर्ड्स. इज दिस वेरी क्लियर फॉर एवरीवन? सो ओवरऑल व्हाट नीड्स टू बी डन? ट्रांसपेरेंसी इंश्योर करो सो दैट यूजर में कॉन्फिडेंस आए. इंडिजिनस इनोवेशंस वगैरह लाओ, ठीक है. देन स्टैंडर्डाइज सिस्टम मेंटेन करो और डेवलप करो फॉर मेडिकल रिकॉर्ड मेंटेनेंस, ठीक है. देन एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ प्रधानमंत्री जन आरोग्य योजना कैन बी यूज्ड टू एक्सपैंड द आउटरीच ऑफ डिजिटल हेल्थ टू ऑल द रेसिडेंट्स. डेटा कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी के लिए एथिक्स वगैरह को मैंडेटरी कर दो for the use of digital healthcare, that it should be mandatory, that you have to take the legitimate consent. Can you see this point also remains common in both the things? So just few here and there, and moreover the overall answer remains the same. Is this very clear for everyone? I think this is the last topic with respect to health, vaccine hesitancy. इंडिया में थैंकफुली ये दिक्कत नहीं हुई इतनी, क्योंकि 84% ऑफ आवर पॉपुलेशन, नहीं दिक्कत अभी भी है बट उतनी नहीं, कि एटलीस्ट 84% ऑफ आवर पॉपुलेशन बिलीव्स दैट वैक्सीन्स आर इफेक्टिव. सो दैट इज द थिंग. हाउएवर देयर आर अदर कंट्रीज वेयर द प्रॉब्लम हैज बीन वेरी सिग्निफिकेंट, राइट? अल्बानिया, दे रैंक lowest. Only 14% of the population has the belief that the vaccine would be effective. Is that very clear? So what is vaccine hesitancy? When you have refused or you show reluctance to vaccinate yourself despite the availability of vaccine is known as vaccine hesitancy. In fact, according to WHO, it is one of the top 10 threats to global health. So either it is due to your complacency or your convenience or your confidence that despite availability of the vaccine, you are not agreeing to get yourself vaccinated. And it is one of the major emerging global threat which is there in the world. Now, what are the implications of vaccine hesitancy? Obviously, the deadly diseases are making a comeback. There is a risk that the vaccines are not reaching the full potential because of lack of quick and effective response to the public safety concerns with respect to vaccine. Then recent outbreaks also calls for diphtheria, polio, measles. It calls for global vigilance. So that is nothing but implication of vaccine hesitancy. इन कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इंडिया थोड़ा बहुत भी जो वैक्सीन हेसिडेंसी एग्जिस्ट करता है वो क्यों करता है? एक तो मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन है. पीपल आर नॉट बीइंग मेड अवेयर अबाउट द साइड इफेक्ट्स विच आर देयर रिलेटेड टू वैक्सीन. अगर हम पहले से इन्फॉर्म करके रखेंगे कि भाई बुखार चढ़ेगा, ठीक है, देयर कैन बी साइड इफेक्ट्स लाइक कॉफ एंड एवरीथिंग, सो यू नीड टू टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्फ, यू नो, ऑल दीज थिंग्स. सो प्रायर इन्फॉर्मेशन इज मिसिंग. Secondly, there have been certain unfortunate incidences where people have died. They might have died due to other factors, but then it creates rumor or misinformation which has not been corrected on time. Then obviously there exist religious superstitions and beliefs which also negatively impact the application of vaccine. Then many a times when the parental consent is not taken, for example, lack of parental consent before the vaccine is given to the children, it further generates apprehension in the mind of parents. Is this very clear? So all these factors can be mentioned in the context of that what is the situation in context of India. Is that clear? Then most importantly, people do not trust the public healthcare system. So which has also further dampened the overall the speed at which the vaccination could have been done. Okay? So the public healthcare system has failed to gain the trust of the public. What measures needs to be taken? It is very important that any kind of misinformation, rumor needs to be immediately corrected. There has to be fact check. Stringent action should be taken against those who are spreading the false rumors or information. There should be proper dialogue based intervention. You cannot force vaccines onto the people because it would have a negative repercussion. It might generate apprehension. There has to be intervention at local level. For example, the NGOs, civil societies, ASHA workers, primary healthcare centers. There should be proper dialogue based intervention where you create sufficient awareness with respect to the benefits of vaccine before inducing vaccines to them. Is that very clear? You have to engage with the community, you have to engage with the parents or the families so as to develop a better qualitative healthcare system. Is that very clear? Okay. Can we proceed? This is just the report for some more data if you want. कि अगर किसी को और ज्यादा डेटा चाहिए तो वो कर सकते हैं. There is another topic that has been medical termination of pregnancy bill. जल्दी से देखो. Act है अब तो ये, तो medical termination of pregnancy act. Now with respect to this act, whenever an act has been amended or it has been passed, ठीक है, 71 में act आया था ना, Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, the original act was in 71. This is 21. So 50 years ho gaye na? Possible question. Yes, it becomes the possible question. So Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 2021 has been finally amended. The original act came, I think, was in 1971. एक बार check कर लेना. I think it's 50th year. ठीक है. So the premise based on which the act has been introduced is that the premise has been written for you. The new medical techniques have allowed for the safe removal of the fetus at the advanced stage. Then in order to protect the confidentiality of the women, in order to protect her dignity, in order to protect the reproductive rights of the unmarried women, then also to ease the burden on the judiciary, to prevent any kind of socio-economic, psychological impact which is caused due to unwanted pregnancy. Is that very clear? And also to expand the access to the safe and legal abortion, right? And because of the advances which have been made in the scientific field, there are various fetal abnormalities which are detected after 20 weeks. So because of all these factors, the act has been amended. Is this clear? This is how it looks like. For example, it provides for the ground of abortion that if it causes risk to the life of the mother, or it is believed that it would cause a grave injury to her, or the risk is that the child may be born with any physical or mental abnormalities, or where the pregnancy is caused due to rape or failure of contraception. So these are the general grounds which are provided with respect to the availing abortion. With respect to this failure of contraceptive, initially it was only available to the married women. So there were a lot of adolescent pregnancies which were happening because of lack of awareness, and they were resorting to unsafe, illegal methods of abortion which were putting the life of the young girls in threat. So to reduce this and to recognize the reproductive rights of the unmarried women, the contraceptive failure condition has been relaxed. Okay. Now it says that up till 20 weeks, basically the opinion of one registered medical practitioner is required, and these are the grounds for abortion. With respect to 20 to 24 weeks, two registered medical practitioners' opinion is required, and it will apply to certain special cases. But wait. In your act, although जो हमारा ओरिजिनल बिल था उसने बोला था सर्वाइवर्स ऑफ रेप या फिर विक्टिम्स ऑफ इंसेस्ट या डिफरेंटली एबल्ड या माइनर, लेकिन जब फाइनली हमने उसे एक्ट बनाया तो व्हाट वी डिड वाज ओनली द सर्वाइवर्स ऑफ द रेप हैज बीन मेंशन्ड in this 20 to 24 category. For rest of the category, the act में they have not mentioned. अगर आप गजेट को पढ़ोगे, so they have not mentioned. What they have said, it is up to the government to notify. So that becomes a loose end interpretation. ठीक है? So the act says survivors of the rape, that has been clearly prescribed even in the gazette also. Then limit of 24 weeks will not apply in case of fetal abnormality which has to be diagnosed by the medical board. Medical board would be consisting of these people. The government would be notifying the powers and functions of the medical board. At the end of it, the privacy of the women has to be protected. Otherwise, there are penalties for it. You can compare MTP 1971 with that of the Act. This has now become the Act. Gazette में छप गया है March 2021 में. So up to 12 weeks दोनों में advice of one doctors चाहिए. 12 to 20 weeks initially 2 doctors चाहिए था. यहाँ पे it is 1 doctor only. This is what we discussed. 20 to 24 weeks के लिए तो allowed ही नहीं था original act में. But now it has been allowed for some categories of the pregnant women. So in this some category of the pregnant women, the rape survivor has been mentioned in the gazette. With respect to the other categories, it is up to the central government to notify that. Is that clear? For 24 weeks से ज़्यादा अगर हो जाता है, so that is not allowed in the original act, but in the new act, if the fetus is suffering from the abnormal, any kind of abnormality detected by the medical board, then it can happen. Is that very clear? ठीक है. Then termination of due to the failure of contraceptives initially was only by the married women, but now it has also been allowed by the unmarried women. Then medical boards, पहला तो कोई provision था ही नहीं. अब there is a provision and it consists of gynecologist, pediatrician, radiologist, and other members notified by the state government. Is that clear? Privacy has to be maintained, otherwise they would be punishable with the imprisonment up to a year, fine or both. Is that clear? तो यहाँ पे हमने सिंपली बात करी कि क्या नया प्रोविजन है, यहाँ पे हमने उसका कंपैरेटिव एनालिसिस दे दिया. Now, what is the issue with the act? The category of the women who can terminate the pregnancy in this is not specified. यही मैं कहना चाहती हूँ कि गजट में it is only mentioned for with respect to the survivors of the rape, and rest के लिए central government has to notify. तो जब rules बनते हैं तब उनमें notify हो जाएगा. Then time frame in which medical board has to give their decision with respect to aborting the child post 24 weeks have not been specified. There is no clarity with respect to transgender person. Most importantly, we do not have infrastructure. We do not have qualified medical professionals to terminate the pregnancy. In fact, it is believed, according to National Family Health Survey report number 4, 53% abortion has been done by registered medical practitioners. Rest has been done by unregistered. So we do not have qualified medical professionals. The act still doesn't give women the freedom to decide. Is that clear? The nod from the medical board has to be required in case of pregnancies which goes beyond 24 weeks. Is that clear? And even if it has been a situation of rape, let us say a person is a rape survivor, ठीक है? तो उसमें 20 to 24 weeks में तो mentioned है. What if the pregnancy has gone beyond 24 weeks and a person is a survivor of rape? In that, the medical board can only intervene if there is the problem with respect to fetus. What if the woman is a survivor of rape and she is going for abortion after 24 weeks? Then for that you have to file the writ petition, and you know how the judiciary works. Okay? So then it again becomes a challenge. So even after the act also, although it is a very welcoming step, but even after that women does not have the freedom to decide. Is that clear? And most importantly, when the act was being passed, it has been said was not sent to the Parliament select committees for detailed scrutiny. So the consultation from all the stakeholders have not been reflected. Overall, the categories of the women should have been specified. So at least when the rules are issued, the category should be specified. There should be proper टाइम पीरियड विच शुड बी स्पेसिफाइड. कभी कभी क्या होता है यार, एक्ट भी बन जाता है बट एक्ट में कुछ लैक्यूनास रह जाते हैं. सो इफ यू हैव एवर नोटिस, जैसे चाइल्ड लेबर प्रोहिबिशन एक्ट जब पास हुआ था, सो पीपल वर क्वेश्चनिंग व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय फैमिली एंटरप्राइजेस, बिकॉज इट वाज रिटन ना दैट द चाइल्ड लेस देन 14 ईयर वुड बी अलाउड टू वर्क इन द फैमिली एंटरप्राइजेस. सो दे सेड व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय फैमिली एंटरप्राइजेस, दिस इज वन ऑफ द criticism. So when child labor prohibition rules were issued, क्योंकि जब भी act is a framework and the rules have to be implemented, so वहां पे उन्होंने specify कर दिया था what do they mean by family enterprise. So similarly, whenever there are certain lacunas, it could have been addressed by incorporating them in the rules, at least for the time being. ठीक है? Transgender person should have been included, and a detailed scrutiny was required. However, that has not been ensured. Is this clear? Then we have Pradhan Mantri Swasth Suraksha Nidhi. It is a non-lapsable reserve fund which has been created for health in public accounts. The proceed from the education and health cess, उसमें जो share of health है, it would be credited in Pradhan Mantri Swasth Suraksha Nidhi. The money would be used for Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana या Health and Wellness Center, National Health Mission, or attaining the objectives of sustainable development goal number 3. The administration and maintenance would be done under Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. कोई भी financial year में कोई भी expenditure होगा in the above mentioned schemes, first it would be accrued from Pradhan Mantri Swasth Suraksha Nidhi, and after that whatever would be the remaining amount, it would get the support from the budget. Benefit है obviously, अगर हम ये सारी स्कीम्स में adequate money would be invested, so it will enhance the possibility of universal health coverage. It will ensure affordable qualitative services. Since the amount do not lapse, so irresponsible spending would not be the problem. Overall, it will ensure better health. तो अगर better health होगी तो learning outcome, absorption of skills, economic productivity, income, it will reduce the cost which is associated with the disease burden. Is that clear? It is believed that improved health condition results into 1 extra year of agar life expectancy, it further contributes or increases the GDP per capita by 4%. So that is the economic dimension of good health. That when your health condition improves, and let us say it is improving 1 extra or adding 1 extra year in your life, so that is positively contributing to increase in per capita GDP by 4%. Is that clear? Investment in health also creates employment generation, especially for women. Primary health care hai. So the major frontline health workers have been women. So if you are going to invest, you will create more robust primary healthcare center, more outreach is increasing. So it creates potential for the recruitment of women. Mental health care. COVID-19 and mental health. Very quickly. This is generally for your awareness in case the question comes with respect to mental health. National Mental Health Survey says 150 million people in India are in need of care for mental health. Approximately 70 to 92% have failed to receive the treatment. It forms the part of Sustainable Development Goal number 3. The issue with respect to mental health care is we do not have the infrastructure, we do not have the awareness. There exists a stigma associated with mental illness, and there agar koi bhi provision mechanism hai bhi, so it is not being properly implemented. WHO defines mental health as a state of mental well-being, where you are able to cope with the stress of the life, you are able to realize your own potential, you can function productively and fruitfully, and you are successfully able to contribute to your communities. In these 4 situations, you would be termed as mentally fit. So WHO has defined mental health as a state of mental well-being, where you have the ability to realize your potential, to cope with the stress, to contribute to the community, and to function productively. WHO has termed India as the most depressing country. It states that mental illness constitutes 15% of the total disease burden. According to Indian Council for Medical Research, 1 out of 7 individuals are suffering from mental health concerns in India. There has been various efforts made by the government with respect to mental health, whether it was National Mental Health Policy or Raha app by NIMHANS. It's a mobile app which provides you information with respect to psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, okay? Or the National Mental Health Program, that is detection, management and treatment of the illness. Then we had Mental Health Care Act, which was passed in 2017. Health is not a fundamental right in India, but mental health care is a fundamental right in India as specified under this act. If you clearly says, it says that right of person with mental illness, every person shall have the right to access mental health care in government institutions at affordable price and free of cost for people belonging to below poverty line. There is a provision of advance directive with respect to how you intend to get treated and who would be your nominated representative. There is a provision for decriminalization of suicide. There are provisions for central and state mental authority, health review commissions and health review board to protect the rights of the mentally ill person and also to manage the advance directives. Then clearly with respect to electroconvulsive therapies also, they have said it will not be used on the minors, and if you are using it on the adults, it has to be used in a limited capacity and you have to administer the anesthesia or something like that so that the pain is not being inflicted on these people. In general, what have been the causes for mental stress in general? Urbanization, modernization, there is a lot of stress which is being created because the culture is undergoing a change. It becomes difficult for us to adjust to the new emerging value system. concept of marginal man. Then because there are a lot of sections of society which has been subjected to different forms of discrimination, whether gender, caste, race, all of that creates a mental stress. Then there is a feeling of relative deprivation which has been further aggravated because poverty is a problem, unemployment is a problem. Because of social media, there is constant social comparison which is happening, and as a result there is a constant pressure of feeling of relative deprivation. Then because of globalization, there is a new value system which has emerged in which the utmost focus is on the goal of material success. So when you are not able to achieve that goal of material success, then again there is a feeling of uselessness, or you've not been able to achieve the desired goals. So again it results into stress, anxiety and depression. That is imbalance in the means and goals. Then because of disintegration of joint families, increased nuclearization of families, there is lack of social support, lack of emotional support, the problem of social isolation. Because of this social media, we are so obsessed with living in the virtual world that we actually do not have real friends, or the family is not there with us together. Then because of objectification, commodification, it also results into various forms of mental illness. Then it can also be biological factors. So overall, in general, what needs to be done? First and foremost, charismatic personalities should come forward and lend their voice to the cause in order to create awareness with respect to mental health. Then I've already told you, depending upon what is your target population, because mental health is not very specific to urban areas, right? It is being penetrated in rural areas as well. बस इतना है कि उन्हें शायद पता नहीं है कि वो depressed है. अर्बन एरियाज में क्योंकि आपने वर्ड सुना है, हमें पता है डिप्रेशन है, तो हम बोल सकते हैं. वो समझ भी नहीं पाते हैं कि दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम विच इज नोन एज डिप्रेशन, राइट? सो देयर इज लैक ऑफ अवेयरनेस. सो डिपेंडिंग अपॉन योर टारगेट ग्रुप, यू हैव टू कम अप विद द मैकेनिज्म्स ऑफ जनरेटिंग अवेयरनेस. तो चाहे आप नुक्कड़ नाटक यूज करो, चाहे आप आशा वर्कर्स वगैरह के थ्रू अवेयरनेस जनरेशन करवाओ, या आप कैरिज्मेटिक पर्सनालिटीज लाओ, एडवर्टिजमेंट्स करो, ठीक है? सो वट एवर वे इज कंफर्टेबल. सिनेमा कैन बी यूज टू create awareness. So awareness about mental health, first thing. Second thing, destigmatization. ठीक है? एक तो डेटा नहीं कलेक्ट हो पाता है इसीलिए क्योंकि स्टिग्मा एसोसिएटेड है. हमने पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटी में करा था ना, अंडर रिपोर्टिंग है स्पेसिफिकली विद रिस्पेक्ट टू मेंटल इलनेस. देन एडिक्वेट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इज रिक्वायर्ड. अगर आज भी देखा जाए तो हमारे पास साइकोलॉजिस्ट नहीं है. वी हैव जस्ट 9,000 साइकियाट्रिस्ट फॉर 1.3 बिलियन पॉपुलेशन. सो कैन यू सी वी डू नॉट हैव. तो प्रॉपर एजुकेशन होना चाहिए. द करियर इन मेंटल हेल्थ शुड बी प्रमोटेड. ठीक है? सो ऑल ऑफ दैट नीड्स टू बी डन. देन प्रमोट करो योगा, मेडिटेशन. सो द ऑल्टरनेटिव मेडिसिनल सिस्टम कैन बी यूज्ड in order to reduce the stress. Then role of community should be strengthened. Concept of telemedicine, telepsychiatry to be very precise, yeah, digitally mediated therapies should be promoted. It has to be integrated approach. First detect करो, treat करो, manage करो. ठीक है? So identify करो mentally ill people को, detect करो the cause of mental illness, what should be the prescription, treat करो, and once they have been treated, manage करो, ensure करो they have been rehabilitated and reintegrated in the society. COVID-19 has further aggravated the problem of mental illness. The following are the factors responsible. First is the policy of the government. For example, social distancing, quarantine, travel restrictions, temporary closure of schools, restriction on large gatherings. All of this has generated fear, anxiety, depression. There is a constant fear of losing jobs, business, saving, especially in context of informal sector. It has further spiked distress and frustration. Then because of stigmatization which has happened during pandemic, especially for the frontline workers, especially against those who have tested positive, especially against those who are suffering from comorbidity or are the old age people. Then there is disrupted education system, especially among the adolescent. What will happen to their future? Their education system has been disrupted because of social stress in the family stress, or the economic position has been disrupted. They have been constantly subjected to various form of abuse because हमारी families में often the kids are used as a scapegoat to vent out the frustration. Even the mothers are venting out their frustration on kids because the longer shift or duration of the double shift. So because of which the incidences of mental stress among kids have increased. Males have increased because of loss of job, uncertainty. Adolescents have increased because of disruption of education system or lack of certainty with respect to future. In general, the kids have increased because they have become the victim of physical abuse. Women has increased because the burden of the work, the unpaid care work or the domestic chores have increased. The duration of their double shift has increased. So there are different sections of the society. Old people, the stress is because they have been stigmatized, right? There is a constant fear that they are more susceptible to contract infection and in the absence of adequate health care. So people with comorbidities, old age, they have become, it has spiked uncertainty, stress, anxiety, because they don't know, एक तो information नहीं है उनके पास, उनको लगता है they are more susceptible to infection. तीसरा, they know that the healthcare system is not available, qualitative healthcare. So that is the challenge. There is a constant fear of getting infected, especially among the frontline workers like health workers, the police who have been working. So there is a constant fear of getting infected. There is lack of access to appropriate care. Then obviously journalism. इसके बारे में तो क्या ही चर्चा करें. So frequent misinformation, repeated images of ill people, dead bodies, it has also spiked the fear among the people. Then limited access है, we have already talked about it. Then understaffed, overwhelmed police officials, यही मैं कहना चाह रही थी. Constant fear है, खुद भी infect होंगे, family को भी करेंगे, and they are witnessing the death of the patients. I have talked about it few minutes back. So all of this has aggravated the problem of mental illness, specifically during the time of COVID. So whether it is women, whether it is child, whether it is adolescent, whether it is adult male, whether it is old people or suffering with comorbidity or the frontline workers, everyone is under constant fear or stress. क्या करें? Implications पढ़ो पहले. Many people, in order to cope up with these stress, might resort to negative ways, drugs, alcoholism, online gaming addiction. Again, that creates new set of problems. Then there is increased risk of discrimination and violence against, which is very specific to caste, children or gender. यही मैं कह रही थी. जब बहुत ज़्यादा stress हो जाता है तो यही जो weak sections होते हैं ना, not literally weak, but you consider them weak, passive and dependent. So they are often being subjected to various forms of violence. ठीक है. Then overall increase in morbidity, overall increase in suicide rates. DALI मतलब disability adjusted life year. ठीक है. Then economic shocks, health expense, loss of income. The state also loses income, which it would have earned in the form of taxes. So completely it has health repercussions, it has social repercussions, it has economic repercussions. ठीक है. What should be done? Overall we have discussed the way forward some time back. उसमें बस ये कुछ चीजें ऐड कर सकते हो, जैसे कि सस्टेन करो और स्ट्रेंथन करो मेंटल हेल्थ केयर सर्विसेज को, प्रायोरिटाइज करो, देन कम्युनिटी बेस्ड इंटरवेंशंस करो, और वो जब हमने टेलीमेडिसिन की बात करी थी तो टेली साइकेट्री या डिजिटली मेडिटेड थेरेपी शुड बी स्केल्ड अप. ठीक है. सो अलोंग विद द वे फॉरवर्ड्स दैट वी हैव डिस्कस्ड बिफोर, ये वाले करे थे ना यार हमने, ये वे फॉरवर्ड्स, इसके साथ यू कैन ऐड दीज 3 पॉइंट्स. Is this clear? This is the initiative which was taken by Ministry of Education under Atmanirbhar Bharat Manodarpan initiative to provide psychosocial support to the students, teachers, parents, and to address the issues related to mental health and emotional well-being. Finally, health comes to an end and 4 baj gaye. Education is still left. तो करते हैं, चलो और पढ़ते हैं थोड़ा. I would have classes with you as far as updation classes are left. तो वहां पे मैं बाकी टॉपिक कवर कर लूंगी. 2-3 इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें हैं वो अभी कवर कर लेती हूं. ठीक है, एजुकेशन से रिलेटेड. जस्ट अ सेक, अगर मैं न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी कवर, 1 सेकंड रुकना, हम न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी कवर कर लेते हैं. हम कवर कर सकते हैं प्राइवेटाइजेशन. We can also cover digital divide. अगर हम इतना कवर कर लेते हैं, do you have the list, index है of the content? Just let me know क्या बचेगा. तब तक शुरू करते हैं. Let's study for another 15 minutes. Can we take 2 minutes break? Let's take 2 minutes break. ठीक है, तो एक काम करते हैं, थोड़ा बहुत कर लेते हैं एजुकेशन में, एटलीस्ट जो इंपॉर्टेंट है. हायर एजुकेशन कर लेते हैं, न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी कर लेते हैं. लेट्स डू प्राइवेट सेक्टर का इन्वॉल्वमेंट इन एजुकेशन, डिजिटल डिवाइड, ये कुछ जो इंपॉर्टेंट है वो कर लेते हैं. उसके बाद जो 2-4 टॉपिक्स बचेंगे, आई विल प्रोवाइड यू द कंटेंट एंड we'll discuss them very briefly in the updation classes because we still have updation class with you. Let's quickly start. क्या ही ब्रेक लें फिर, तो चलो शुरू करो. न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, द एजुकेशन पॉलिसी वॉज इंट्रोड्यूस. देखो लास्ट ईयर बहुत सवाल पूछ लिए हैं तो इस बार मैं नहीं कह सकती किस कैपेसिटी में पूछेंगे, बट लास्ट ईयर दे हैव आस्क्ड एटलीस्ट डिजिटल एजुकेशन ऑल्सो दे हैव asked, and they have also asked new education policy vis-a-vis sustainable development goal number 4. ठीक है, so they have been asking questions on this. So let's very quickly start. Vision of new education policy was basically to create an equitable and vibrant, knowledgeable society, to create a society which is aware about their rights, duties, constitutional values, ठीक है, which basically to create a virtuous society, in simple words, right? A society which is skilled, which is virtuous, which is committed to protection of human rights, sustainable development, global well-being. तो अगर कभी क्वेश्चन बनता है न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी पे, दिस कैन हेल्प यू, और एनालिसिस आ जाता है, तो दिस कैन हेल्प यू इन ओवरऑल अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट द ऑब्जेक्टिव वाज टू क्रिएट अ सोसाइटी व्हिच इज स्किल्ड, व्हिच इज वर्चुअस, व्हिच इज committed to different values like sustainable development, global well-being, or human rights. Now very quickly, this is how it looks like. So I will give a very brief overview कि ओवरऑल आप बहुत बार पढ़ चुके हो, आप हर साल प्री और मेंस के लिए न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी पढ़ रहे हो, तो हम बहुत जल्दी जल्दी बात करेंगे कि इट हैज टॉक्ड अबाउट अर्ली चाइल्डहुड केयर एंड एजुकेशन फॉर द वेरी फर्स्ट टाइम. दे हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट अर्ली चाइल्डहुड केयर एंड एजुकेशन वुड बी डिलीवर्ड थ्रू आंगनवाड़ीज एंड प्री स्कूल्स. आंगनवाड़ी में लास्ट ईयर दे हैव क्रिएटेड द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ बाल वाटिकास. ठीक है, देन दे हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट हाउ दिस आइडिया ऑफ अर्ली चाइल्डहुड care and education would be jointly implemented by different ministries, and NCRTs would be developing a national curricular and pedagogy framework for early childhood care and education. Their target is to attain foundational literacy and numeracy for grade 3 by 2025. So that's the target they have set. Then they are also talking about Diksha platform, which we already know. It is a repository for high quality source, which is also available in different regional languages, and it would be available for the students, for the teachers, for the parents. ठीक है. Overall their objective is कि gross enrollment ratio has to be 100% from preschool to secondary level by 2030. ठीक है. Then in order to ensure that there is universalization of gross enrollment ratio, they are trying to solve the problem of equity, they are trying to solve the problem of accessibility. So open and distance learning programs would be offered. At the same time, the focus would be on socio-economically disadvantaged groups. Then there is new curriculum and pedagogy which has been introduced, that is 5+3+3+4. So there has been a change with respect to overall curriculum and pedagogy. Overall the curriculum has also been reduced. Basic core essentials पे focus किया जाएगा, and the focus would be on essential learning and critical thinking. Experiential learning would be promoted, that is learning through experiences. So if you want to make children aware about animals, take them to zoo. That is what is learning through experiences. ठीक है. Then arts integrated, sports integrated education would be provided. There would be freedom which would be provided with respect to the choice of the stream. हमारी तरह नहीं कि अगर PCM लेना है तो दो ही ऑप्शन है, या तो बायो के साथ लो या इकोनॉमिक्स के साथ लो, तो इस तरह की दिक्कतें आपको नहीं आएंगी. द फ्यूचर जनरेशन. देन देयर आर इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ कॉन्टेम्पररी सब्जेक्ट्स, फॉर एग्जाम्पल जो आज के टाइम के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, लाइक एनवायरमेंटल एजुकेशन हो गया, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस हो गया, ऑर्गेनिक लिविंग हो गया, ऑल ऑफ दैट. देन फोकस हैज ऑल्सो बीन मेड विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू वोकेशनल एजुकेशन, विच इज द मेजर रीजन बिहाइंड ड्रॉप आउट्स. right? तो 6 to 8 standard में vocational education would be provided and hands-on training would be provided by the vocational experts like gardeners, potters, carpenters. Is that clear? Then overall assessment के लिए there would be a national assessment center, that is PARAK, which would be created for analysis for holistic development and it would be set up under Ministry of Education. उन्होंने बोला एग्जामिनेशन 3rd, 5th एंड 8th स्टैंडर्ड में करेंगे, बोर्ड एग्जामिनेशन वैसे ही होगा 10th एंड 12th, बट यस थोड़ा सा रीडिजाइनिंग करेंगे, ठीक है. देन पहले क्या होता था, इट वाज ओनली विद रिस्पेक्ट टू एकेडमिक परफॉर्मेंस असेसमेंट. नाउ 360-degree holistic assessment would be provided in which peer-to-peer assessment would be there, self-assessment would be there, teachers assessment would be provided. The assessment would be done with respect to your cognitive skills, your psychomotor skills as well as your affective, emotional skills. Emotional intelligence भी तो develop करना है ना. The National Testing Agency would be the autonomous organization which would be conducting the entrance examination for undergraduate and graduate admission. Then the focus would also be to provide the elementary education in the mother tongue. The target is up till 8th standard the education should be provided in mother tongue, but they will ensure at least initially 5th standard तक तो provide करें ही. फिर Indian sign languages would be made standardized in order to make education inclusive for children with disability. Then 3-language formula would be implemented with greater flexibility. Then in order to ensure inclusive education or education act as a tool for leveler rather than inequality, there are provisions for gender inclusion fund, there are provisions for special education zones which would be focusing on those areas where there are large population for socio-economic disadvantaged groups. Then children with disability will also be fully able to participate in regular schooling right from the foundational stage to higher education. Remember हमने कल ही बात करी थी inclusive education without labeling when I was discussing person with disability. That is what it means. ठीक है. Then there has been a comprehensive curriculum framework for the teachers also. Now, no matter how good infrastructure you create, how many resources you generate, if the teachers who are providing education, they themselves are not skilled, then it becomes a challenge. So, pre-job training, on-job training, everything would be ensured. NTA, National Testing Agency, would be the organization for the admission to B.Ed. Is that clear? Then proper mentoring वगैरह will be ensured. Then more autonomy would be provided to the teachers. Professional standards for teachers would be developed by the National Council for Teacher Education. Then with respect to the governance, the schools would be organized into complexes or the clusters. And in order to ensure, इस तरह से भी हम कर सकते हैं that a private school is being clubbed with the public school and there can be exchange of good practices. ठीक है? So all of that would be ensured. This is what I meant. Twinning or pairing of one public school with the private schools. Then the separate system would be there for policy making, for regulation with respect to the operation and academic matters. Is that clear? The good thing is both the public and the private schools will be accredited on the same criteria. And school quality assessment and accreditation framework would be developed by SCRT. एक periodic checkup किया जाएगा of the overall system based on National Assessment Survey and it would be done by National Assessment Center. Is that very clear? Now, with respect to higher education, graded autonomy would be there with respect to कि आपका higher institute किस category में fall करता है. Research universities में, teaching universities में या autonomous degree granting colleges में. Research universities में equal focus है research और teaching पे. Teaching universities में primary focus teaching पे है, लेकिन research पे भी focus है. लेकिन जो autonomous degree granting colleges है, the complete focus is on teaching. हमारा target है by 2040 all the higher educational institutions should become multidisciplinary. Our target is currently the gross enrollment ratio is 27%, 27.1%. So हमारा target है to increase it to 50% by 2035. There are provisions of multidisciplinary as in the curriculums, there is provision of multiple entry exit point, there is provision for academic bank of credit, there is provision of creating MERUs, that is multidisciplinary education research universities which are at par with IITs and IIMs. ठीक है. देन हायर एजुकेशन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया की बात करी गई है, विच विल हैव 4 वर्टिकल्स रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर रेगुलेशन, स्टैंडर्ड सेटिंग, एक्रेडिटेशन, फंडिंग, एंड बोथ पब्लिक एंड प्राइवेट हायर एजुकेशन वुड बी गवर्न्ड बाय द सेम सेट ऑफ नॉर्म्स. इंटरनेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ हायर एजुकेशन के लिए भी इंटरनेशनली रेलिवेंट करिकुलम हैज टू बी प्रिपेयर्ड. मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली एक इंटरनेशनल स्टूडेंट्स ऑफिस होगा जहां पे all their grievances can be addressed. Then high performing Indian universities will be encouraged to set up their campuses in other countries. Is that very clear? ठीक है. Then research collaboration, student exchange program would be appreciated or encouraged. Again, with respect to equity and inclusion, you have provisions for gender balance, you have provisions for students from socio-economically disadvantaged sections. ठीक है. Is this very clear? Then with respect to financing education, our target is 6% of GDP. Currently it is 3%. So we are calling for private philanthropic activities in the education sector. यही हम बात करेंगे, private sector in the education. Then technology, through National Education Technology Forum, it will be created for basically free exchange of ideas with respect to usage of technology, so as to improve your learning, so as to improve your administration, overall assessment and planning. Then these are few other things. Adult education हो गया, online education and digital education. Then professional education, similarly promotion of Indian languages, arts and culture. ठीक. Analysis. एक brief idea होना चाहिए, उसके बाद we will be talking about the analysis, overall analysis of new education policy. So yes, the focus has been on skill development, vocational education, which will create opportunities for self-employment, or which will create an army of employable youth, which will overall contribute to the development of country. A good step. Then the public expenditure we are talking about to increase it to 6%. Again, it will overall improve the infrastructure and the quality of education. We have provided provisions for preserving local art and culture, which is again a developing or a progressive step towards preserving the endangered or the traditional knowledge and art. Then with 3 language formula, it will improve the learning outcome. It will familiarize us with the cultural diversities. It will also lead to preservation of endangered language, and it will make Indian languages remain all time vibrant and relevant. Then with respect to multiple entry and exit point, the students will be having incentive to seek higher education. There would be more flexibility, more choice. It will result into higher gross enrollment ratio, and employment opportunities will increase. Now, with the establishment of Higher Education Commission of India, where we have talked about the 4 verticals, चाहे standard setting हो, regulation हो, accreditation हो, funding हो, so there would be better regulation, standardization and no duplication of work. Then efforts have also been made to curb the commercialization of education. Then the entire education system has been restructured. For the very first time, we have incorporated early childhood care and education, a welcome step. Then midday meal has been expanded to this. This is nothing but PM Poshan. We have talked about it. Then activity-based learning. So it's critical thinking, innovativeness, application abilities will be developed. Okay. Then overall, the change in pedagogy. That instead of जो core academics हैं वो तो bare minimum होंगे, rest में application, practicality will be focused upon, experiential learning would be focused upon. So there has been a change in the pedagogy. Then collaboration with other institutions will bring about more quality and excellence. However, there are certain issues and challenges with new education policy. पहली बात तो funding आएगी कहाँ से, तो इसीलिए अब वो जो next topic हमारा है वो इसी पर है कि private sector का participation. Then multilingualism में negative impact भी हो सकता है learning outcome का, especially with those children who are the children of the migrant population. तो कितनी languages पढ़ेंगे अगर वो migrate होते रहे तो, पहली चीज. दूसरी चीज है कि ऐसा तो है नहीं कि state specific linguistic reorganization हुआ है, state specific. Even after linguistic reorganization, there is so much diversity with respect to language that आप हर school में according to mother tongue you cannot deliver, right? So that is the challenge. Then vocational education पे अगर इतना stress करेंगे, so there would be a problem associated with early dropout in the search of employment opportunity, because it has been said अगर poverty है तो child labor cannot be addressed. ठीक है, and any contradiction already जो existing provisions हैं they have to be in sync. So any contradiction with the existing RTE Act might be a challenge. अब RTE Act कहता है 6 to 14 is free and compulsory, but National Education Policy is focusing right from preschool to secondary education, becomes a challenge. Is that very clear? Then you can prepare the act, the implementation still depends upon the state. There is always a fear of privatization in the name of philanthropy or in the name of public-private partnership. Then National Testing Agency is responsible for conducting the examination. So again, there is a problem which might, it is a fear that it might generate or encourage the coaching industry. So that becomes a challenge. So the policy is good on paper. Let's see how far it would be successful. Most importantly, we do not have resources. So if you want experiential learning, all of that requires financial resources. You do not have faculties also, neither quantity wise nor quality wise. So again, it becomes a challenge because in our society, teaching is not a very lucrative or a very coveted profession. When you are not left with any other option, you become a teacher. That is how it is being visualized. Nobody say, "Mera bachpan se dream tha teacher banne ka." It doesn't work like this. Okay? So what should be the way forward? Obviously, जो भी conflicting values या disconnect है with the previous policies, they should be avoided. Then priorities should be set right with respect to the government also and with respect to the stakeholders also. Then most importantly, attitudinal change is the need of the hour. There should be clear-cut outlining of the chain of command so as to avoid any kind of duplication. Then good leadership with respect to the policy. See, policy, no matter how good it is on the paper, if you don't implement it properly, so there has to be proper leadership. Again, there should be proper data collection, which will enable you to mark the progress, right? So whatever periodic reviews have to be done, evaluation have to be done, plugging in the loopholes have to be done. ठीक है, लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स, कैस्केडिंग प्लानिंग कहते हैं इसे, लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स सेटअप करो, शॉर्ट टर्म विजन्स सेटअप करो, पीरियोडिक इंस्पेक्शन करो so that short term targets are achieved, timely achievement of the short term targets so that in a longer run long term vision can be achieved. Cascaded planning structure. Private sector participation in the education system. Very quickly. See, it is always believed that private sector needs to steps in. जब भी government resources are not enough to ensure universalization of the education. And education sector is one sector where the private sector has to operate on not-for-profit basis. So it is perceived that private sector's help can be sought by the government in two capacity. या तो उन्हें contract out कर दो. ठीक है, so few specific asset investment can be contracted out to the private sector. For example, अगर आपको events organize कराने हैं या आपको कोई committees establish या function करानी है या let us say preparation of the result, कोई भी ऐसा job जो आप specific investment चाहते हो तो वो सारा contract out किया जा सकता है. या फिर suppose करो आपको school में library कंस्ट्रक्ट करनी है या जो भी ऐसा कुछ करना है, कैफे वगैरह इस्टेब्लिश करना है, तो स्पेसिफिक एसेट में द प्राइवेट सेक्टर कैन इन्वेस्ट. Or it can be private finance initiative where a long-term contract has been signed, where a significant asset ownership will be by the private sector. For example, the land for the school is provided by the government, let us say. However, the school would be constructed by the private sector. So there can be long-term contract also, or it can be few specific asset investment by the private sector. So what is the need for the private sector investment? By currently our expenditure on the education sector is 3%. However, ideally it should have been 6%. So in this backdrop, the participation of private sector becomes very important. Not only the intervention by the private sector will provide you the financial resource, but it will also provide a new vision to the education system. It will instill a fresh thinking in the education system. Also, at this point of time, to make your educational content relevant to the market, the collaboration between the industry and the academics is very important, because it is creating, for example, we are creating educated youth, but that educated youth is not employable. So in order to further innovation, growth, ठीक है, और in order to create the pool of employable youth, it is very important that the collaboration between the two has to be ensured. However, there are certain challenges as far as private sector participation is concerned. It would lead to exclusionary education system, where largely the people from the marginalized section would be excluded from reaping the benefits or the opportunities of education. Secondly, commercialization of education will lead to economic exploitation by the private schools which are run for the profit, and at the same time it will discourage those private schools which are working on not for profit or a philanthropic basis. Is that clear? Then the schools also becomes the arena for the emergence of the black money. So the issue of black money को white करने का भी arena बन जाता है. So it becomes a platform for corrupt practices. Then obviously in context of private school या private sector का intervention, in the absence of proper regulation and the presence of corrupt practices will further aggravate the challenges. So overall what needs to be done? पहली बात तो एक क्लियर कट पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए सो एज टू बूस्ट द प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट. एक क्लैरिटी होनी चाहिए. भाई गवर्नमेंट के काम में ना यूजुअली लोग इन्वेस्ट करना नहीं चाहते क्योंकि क्लैरिटी नहीं होती है. ठीक है, सो एक प्रॉपर डिटेल्ड प्लान होना चाहिए सो दैट यू बूस्ट प्राइवेट सेक्टर इन्वेस्टमेंट. एक प्रॉपर रेगुलेटरी इन्वायरमेंट होना चाहिए. CSR cells should be established in various schools and universities which can attract the funds. Then private sector can be roped in for the purpose of management and administration because they are known for their efficient functioning. Is that very clear? Similarly, the financial help can be provided by these private sectors to the children from the underprivileged sections. Is that clear? Is it making sense? So CSR हो गया, private philanthropy हो गई, that should be encouraged. Let's take one more topic, and after that whatever topics are remaining I'll provide you the content, but we will discuss in the updated class. Okay, so this would be the last topic. So this is with respect to the higher education. So All India Survey for Higher Education report was published by Ministry of Education. So एक basic idea what is this All India Survey for Higher Education. एक annual web based survey है, हर साल होता है, status of higher education बताता है. It consists of 3 categories. One is the university, college as well as standalone institutions. ये key findings हैं. Again, it will help you giving credibility to your argument. So currently the gross enrollment ratio is 27.1. The target is to make it 50% by 2035. Overall, there has been an increase in female enrollment, about 18% increase, which is a good thing. But when it comes down to institution of national importance, the institution of national importance are those institutions which help in creating the skilled workforce. So in those, the enrollment of women has been lowest. That means the investment has not been made on technical education of women or the professional education among women. Then overall enrollment has increased with highest number of enrollment in context of UP. Then gender parity हमने achieve कर लिया है. That is, it is 1.01. मतलब अगर enrollment rate की बात करें तो there is more enrollment rate. It indicates disparity in the favor of girls. So that's a good thing. The pupil teacher ratio in higher education is 26. There are certain disciplines जहाँ पे आपको ज़्यादा concentration मिलेगा students का. So 85% of the students are enrolled in 6 major disciplines, and this is the share of the foreign students. So the share of foreign students is very favorable in order to develop the soft power. However, there are challenges with respect to higher education system in India. First and foremost, the gross enrollment ratio at 27.1% is very less as compared to other countries. For example, US में 88% है, China में 54% है. ठीक है, there are different factors which are responsible for low gross enrollment ratio. तो चाहे वो gender हो, चाहे वो मतलब as in patriarchy हो, चाहे वो economic resources हो, household income हो, medium of instruction हो, ठीक है, so that is the challenge. Next is there exists social inequality, as in there exists a gap or social backwardness would be a better word. So whether it is SCs, whether it is STs, if you look at the gross enrollment ratio, it is much below the national average. Then whatever youth is seeking access to higher education, the quality of the youth that you are producing, they are not employable. And there are 2 reasons for it. पहली बात तो जो education provide कर रहे हो, that is only not qualitative. And secondly, there is lack of congruence between the skills that you are providing, at the same time the demand which is there in the market. So according to India Skills Report, employment across the discipline is only 45%. So if 100 people are being or getting access to higher education, only 45% of them are employable. That is another challenge. Then obviously the educational institution की quality बहुत खराब है. We have already talked about that majority of the institutions do not have the quality certification. So they do not, only 14% have the valid accreditation. Is that clear? Then obviously the faculties की कमी है both with respect to quantity and quality. Major problem is brain drain. And most importantly, जो qualitative faculties हैं, they don't want to stay in India, and those who are staying in India have no incentive to work because there is no proper performance assessment. ठीक है, वेस्ट में peer performance होता है, student असेस करता है परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ द टीचर्स को, बट यहां पे ऐसा कोई सिस्टम नहीं है. अब जैसे विजन में फीडबैक मैकेनिज्म है, यही अगर यूनिवर्सिटी लेवल पे फीडबैक मैकेनिज्म कर दें तो दैट वुड बी मोर अप्रिशिएबल एनी हाउ. सो सब ऑप्टिमल रिसर्च इकोसिस्टम है. जैसे हम लोग बात करते हैं ना कि वैसे ही 3% खर्च कर रहे हो और उसमें भी R&D पे सिर्फ 0.65% ऑफ GDP इज बीइंग स्पेंड. Only 2.5% of the higher institutions are running the PhD programs. The students who are enrolled in PhD programs is just 0.5% of the total students. Most importantly, आपके पास funds भी नहीं है. जो भी funds आते हैं, 65% of those funds are utilized by the central universities. So that becomes the challenge. So these have been the initiatives which are taken by the government with respect to the higher education sector. Whether it is Swayam Portal, Rashtriya Uchchitar Shiksha Abhiyan, or you have RISE, or you have Higher Education Commission, or it is New Education Policy, or it is National Institution Ranking Framework. So all of these initiatives have been taken in order to develop the higher education. Then what is the impact of COVID with respect to the education? Obviously, instead of promoting active learning, it is promoting passive learning. The teachers are not prepared. They are not trained for the virtual classes. Unemployment rate has increased because of delay in examination as well as delay in getting the degree certificates. Because of the issue of digital divide, there is increased incidences of absenteeism, poor performance, lack of involvement in classes. Then because we have discussed now economic shocks वगैरह की वजह से, job loss की वजह से, many children have been withdrawn from the higher education or their enrollment has been deferred. Is this clear? So there might be a question with respect to higher education. There might be a question with respect to higher education vis-a-vis COVID. So that totally depends. ठीक है. So overall, क्या करें? Teaching career should be made more attractive and lucrative. Accreditation capacity should be upgraded. Then adoption of blended learning. You should be prepared for both offline as well as online classes. Investment has to be made in the education sector. आज देखा जाए तो ये जो open learning online education platform है, it is a very lucrative platform. It is expected to create a $2 billion market in India by 2021. So investment has to be made here. Then vocational courses, internships which are relevant to the requirement of the industry needs to be introduced. Is that clear? Then eligible enrollment rate का concept introduce करना चाहिए rather than gross enrollment rate. तो eligibility enrollment rate मतलब you should have an idea that how many students who are eligible as in to study in this age bracket 18 to 23 have been able to pass class 12th. So eligibility enrollment rate rather than gross enrollment rate. So how many children in the age bracket 18 to 23 have been able to pass class 12th. So that should be the criteria to determine to what extent education system has been performing. Is that very clear? We still have topics left. So I will provide you the content. Let me just tell you. This is learning poverty. So COVID-19 vis-a-vis learning poverty, as in it is a share of 10-year-old who are not able to read and comprehend a simple story. Okay. Then we have concept of digital divide. So before that, what is digital learning, as in what is e-learning? What have been the advantages? What are disadvantages? What are the challenges with respect to e-learning? उसमें एक challenge है digital divide, gender divide, lack of teacher training, overindulgence of parents, lack of ability to develop rapport with the students, infrastructure नहीं है, institutional autonomy नहीं है, ठीक है? देन व्हाट शुड बी द वे फॉरवर्ड। फिर कॉन्सेप्ट आता है डिजिटल डिवाइड का, विच इज रिलेटेड टू ई लर्निंग। सो व्हाट्स द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ डिजिटल डिवाइड, व्हाट आर द फैक्टर्स विच लीड्स टू डिजिटल डिवाइड, कोविड-19 विसवी डिजिटल डिवाइड, चैलेंजेस क्या है ब्रिज करने में, वे फॉरवर्ड क्या है। देन स्टेट ऑफ एजुकेशन रिपोर्ट, दिस इज विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू टेक्निकल एंड वोकेशनल एजुकेशन एंड ट्रेनिंग। सो व्हाट इज द स्टेटस, ठीक है, what are the prospects of technical vocational and education training, then what are the challenges, what should be the way forward। फिर ये दो बहुत सिंपल सा है, स्टार्स प्रोजेक्ट वगैरह है, ये आप देख लेना। फिर अर्बनाइजेशन ऑफ पैंडेमिक्स, what are the reasons for urbanization, then what is city planning, then WASH, that is, so what is the WASH strategy, what are the prospects of WASH, challenges, way forward। WASH and India के लिए what have been the steps taken by the government। Then social security for the informal workers। So what is social security? What are the prospects? What is the code of social security 2020? What are the challenges? What are the other challenges and what should be the way forward? Is that clear? तो ये जो 5 टॉपिक्स रह गए हैं ये मैं अपलोड करवा देती हूं, आप गो थ्रू कर लेना। अपडेटेड मटेरियल अपडेशन क्लास में वील मेक अ क्विक reference to them। Is that very clear? So I hope whatever we have discussed so far, things have fallen into place। बस एक एजुकेशन के लिए बता देती हूँ, जैसे आपने हेल्थ के लिए चार्ट बनाया था ना, वैसे ही आप एजुकेशन के लिए बना लेना when you are preparing। Just one sec। For example, you are preparing education, so prepare importance of education overall। What is the importance of education? Prepare the tiers of education system। इसमें आप प्राइमरी एजुकेशन, सेकेंडरी एजुकेशन एंड हायर एजुकेशन, ठीक है। और जब आप ये पढ़ रहे हो, जैसे अभी हमने हायर एजुकेशन पढ़ी, तो पढ़ते कैसे हैं, स्टेटिस्टिक्स हमने पढ़े थे, ऑल इंडिया सर्वे फॉर हायर एजुकेशन, ओवरऑल व्हाट आर द इश्यूज विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू हायर एजुकेशन, what has been the government efforts taken so far and what should be the way forward। ऐसे ही पढ़ा ना हमने अभी हायर एजुकेशन, ऐसे ही पढ़ना है आपको। फिर आप पढ़ोगे सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल नंबर 4, ये आप पढ़ोगे लास्ट ईयर के मेंस 365 जो मैंने आपको बताया था। फिर कॉन्टेम्प्ररी इश्यूज जैसे हो गए, कॉन्टेम्प्ररी इश्यूज जब आप पढ़ रहे हो तो आपने न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का एनालिसिस पढ़ लिया, फिर आपने जैसे लर्निंग पॉवर्टी का कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ लिया, फिर जैसे हमने डिजिटल डिवाइड डिस्कस कर लिया। इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? ठीक है, सो दिस इज हाउ इट हैज टू बी प्रिपेयर्ड, जस्ट कीप दैट इन माइंड। इज दिस वेरी क्लियर फॉर एवरीवन? ठीक, so on this note I conclude the lecture। I hope you have understood। I'll just ask the team to upload the content and just go through it, and if you face any difficulty please let me know। You all have my mail IDs, so you can drop your mails in case you haven't। So this is the mail ID। But just one brief request, if you are writing mains this year then drop a mail। नहीं ऐसा नहीं है, others cannot, absolutely you can। It's just that कि उनके लिए थोड़ा मैटर अर्जेंट है, आप मेरे को दिसंबर में भी मेल डाल सकते हो, ठीक है, दिसंबर एंड में, क्योंकि तब इन पढ़ाई हो चुकी होगी, ठीक है। सो दोज हु आर राइटिंग मेंस दिस ईयर एंड इफ यू आर फेसिंग एनी प्रॉब्लम लेट मी नो, दिस इज माय मेल आईडी। एंड दोज हु विल बी राइटिंग नेक्स्ट ईयर, सो लास्ट वीक ऑफ दिसंबर के बाद मेल डालना, because till that time I am keeping busy with sociology test series, essay work and all that stuff। So tab tak ke liye smriti.s@visionis.in। I'll meet you in the updated class। Chalo, bye people, take care।